The cursor hovers over the button and I let it sit there, because this is the last second of my old life and some part of me wants to feel it. Rally East Build published to store. Behind the browser window, 3 years in this chair, with the blackout curtain duct taped to the frame because the landlord won't fix the rail, and I stopped caring in month 7. 6 energy drink cans on the desk. My phone face down. 17 unread messages from a sister I haven't answered, since she told me I was married to my games and I told her that at least my games talked back. On the second monitor, the beta feedback thread. 211 posts. The pinned one is the longest. Username Ashgrove77. I open it again, maybe because a man about to jump likes to look down first. 4,000 words, headers, bullet points. Somebody sat down after 400 hours in my alpha and wrote me a document, and the document is polite, and the politeness is what makes my jaw tighten. He talks about the multipliers, how the survival parameters compound instead of adding, how a player who spends 3 days questing arrives at day 4 with a rest value so low that every action costs more than it returns, and the curve never recovers. Then the last line. The one I've read enough times to write from memory. You didn't build a game, you built a trap, where the only way out is the thing the player can't see. I laugh. It comes out through my nose ugly, because he's wrong in a specific boring way. He thinks difficulty is a bug. He got beaten by a system, and instead of learning it, he wrote me an essay about how it's unfair. I click reply. I type 2 words. Skill issue. Send. Then I move the cursor to release build, and I press it, and the progress bar starts crawling, and I lean back with my hands behind my head to watch 3 years go out into the world. The pain arrives in my left arm, not a stab. It's something enormous and patient closing its hand around the inside of my chest and starting, very slowly, to make a fist. My arm goes heavy. My mouth tastes like a coin. I try to stand and my legs don't participate. The chair goes over. I go with it. The carpet comes up fast and I'm looking sideways at the underside of my own desk, at a screw I dropped years ago and never found. And it's right there. It's been there the whole time. The last thing I see is the progress bar reflected on the dark part of the screen. 98%. 99. The apartment stays lit for 11 hours after the man on the floor stops moving. The published job completes at 2:14 in the morning. The store page goes live at 2:15. The first review appears at 1 in the afternoon, 2 stars, and it says the game is unfairly hard, and there is no one left in the room to argue with it. Stone, cold, flat, gritty against my cheek. My first thought is that I fell asleep at the desk again and the desk has been replaced with a parking lot. I get my palms under me and push, and my body obeys, which it did not do the last time I asked. That's the detail that starts the alarm ringing somewhere far back in my skull. I sit up. Sand, coarse and pale, spread over a floor of layered rock. I'm sitting on the bottom of something. I look up. There's a square of sky, very far away. White-blue, small enough to cover with 2 hands at arm's length. And between me and it, 4 walls going up in bands of gray and rust brown. I sit there with my mouth open, doing the only thing I know how to do. I count. Not because I'm brave. Because I'm a level designer and my brain measures things the way other people breathe. Each band is a meter. I wrote the shader. I set the band height myself on a Tuesday, because it tiled cleanly. I count the bands 50-50 meters, 10 by 10 at the base, sheer walls, no ledges above 2 meters. I know this place. I know it the way you know your own handwriting. There on the west wall, the vertical crack running from the 11th band down to the 18th. I dragged that spline out with a mouse, got annoyed that it clipped the rock layer, and fudged the depth instead of fixing the mesh. There, the way the light pools instead of falling evenly, because the shadow bake was cheap and I let it ship. And there, in the northeast corner, a stone, roughly the size of a microwave, squarish, flat-topped, half-buried. Except it isn't half-buried. It's floating, 2 centimeters off the sand, a gap of clean shadow underneath it, thin as a knife, running all the way around. Collision bug, bad pivot on the imported mesh. I logged it 8 months ago as Pitrock 04, floating, low priority and never fixed it, because nobody would ever look that closely. I look that closely. I crawl 4 meters and put my fingers in the gap under the rock, and my fingers go through, and there's nothing there, and the rock hangs above my hand like it's forgotten how gravity works. That's when the sound starts coming out of me, laughter first. Hi, wrong, jerking out in pieces, because I'm in it. I'm in tutorial pit.map, the proving ground I built for the survival loop, the thing I named in a text field with my own 2 hands. The laughter turns into something else halfway through, and it goes on a while, and when it stops my throat hurts and my face is wet, and I'm on my side with my knees up. Then I sit up, wipe my face with the hem of my shirt and take inventory. Because that's the only religion I've got. Gray t-shirt, coffee stain over the left ribs, sweatpants, 1 pocket with a hole in it, socks, no shoes. I hadn't worn shoes indoors in a year. Pockets empty. Even the hole is empty. I make the gesture. 2 fingers, a downward pull, like drawing a curtain. I don't expect it to work. It works. The panel hangs in the air, faintly glowing, the exact pale amber I picked from a color wheel because it read well against sand and stone. The font is the one I licensed for $40 in Venturgy. 8 of 8 slots. 8 empty squares. I set that number. 12 felt generous. 6 felt cruel. 8 felt like tension. Sitting in the sand with nothing on my body but cotton and skin, 8 does not feel like tension. It feels like a joke somebody else is telling. I tap the second tab. Status. Rest. 100%. Satiety. 100%. Hydration, 100%. Core temper piercer, stable. Shelter integrity, 0. Sanity, 100%. Something goes cold and quiet in the middle of me, because I know exactly what I'm looking at. Every one of those numbers is at maximum, and every one of them is a ceiling. There's no starter buff in this game. I cut it in the second month because a friend said the first hour felt too soft, and I agreed, and I deleted the function. And the commit message was, removed newbie padding. Let them feel it. From this second forward, every number only goes down. The only way any of them comes back up is if I build the thing that lifts it. I find a stone with a broken edge near the east wall. I put my left palm flat on my knee and look at it a while. Calluses from 20 years of keyboards, the little scar from a box cutter. Then I drag the edge across the meat below the thumb. It hurts. It hurts correctly, not like a game telling me something happened, like a body reporting damage. The blood comes up slow and dark and drips into the sand and makes a small crater, and the sand absorbs it, and the crater dries at the edges. I watch my hand and I count. 40 minutes by the drift of the light. That's when the bleeding stops and the edges pull closed into a thin pink line. Base heal coefficient times the product of the multipliers at 100% across the board. I could write the equation in the sand right now and it would be correct, because I wrote it in a text editor at 3 in the morning with my feet on the desk. The system works exactly the way I wrote it, which means the other thing works exactly the way I wrote it too. Permanent death set to true. I said that out loud on a podcast once, like it was a personality trait. Panic is a resource and I'm not spending it. That's not courage, that's arithmetic. I have 36 hours. I know because of one line of code and one act of cowardice. In the early builds, players died on night 1 so consistently that the retention graph looked like a cliff. I refused to make the game easier. Instead, I slowed parameter decay by 40% for the first 36 hours and never told anybody. And I told myself it wasn't a difficulty change because the rules hadn't changed, only the clock. 36 hours of grace bought with a lie. I'm going to spend all of it. I get up and walk the perimeter. 10 paces north, 10 east, 10 south, 10 west. The meter grid is real because my crafting system snaps to a 1-meter cell and the floor was built to match. Sand, dry on top. I dig with my fingers and at 30 centimeters it goes cool. At 40, it's damp enough to hold a shape when I squeeze. Damp. I stop walking. There's a condensation mechanic in this game. I built it in week 9 and I was proud of it. And in 400 hours of beta footage I watched exactly 2 players find it. Both by accident. Cool night, warm sand, a temperature difference across a barrier. And it works here. Better than anywhere in the map. Because I made the pit's night temperature drop the steepest in the game to keep the tutorial punishing. I made the nights cruel. The cruelty is going to give me water. Craft one. I need an edge. Everything starts with an edge. There's flint here. I place the scatter myself. 20% spawn weight. I go through the sand on hands and knees along the walls where debris collects, and after a long time I have 4 candidates. Dense, dark, ringing when I knock them together. I set one on the flat stone, take another in my fist, and strike downward and inward at an angle, the way I read about in year 1 when I wanted the recipes to feel real. Nothing, my knuckle, nothing. Then a crack like a small bone breaking, and a flake comes off, longer than my thumb, translucent at the edge and sharp enough that when I test it against my forearm, the hair comes off. I sit back on my heels holding a piece of rock and feel something I have not felt in 3 years, which is that I have made a thing. Flint shard accordied, slot 1 of 8. I don't put it in the slot. I hold it. Craft 2, along the base of the south wall. Out of the seams where moisture collects, there are leaves. Broad, waxy, palm-sized. I place that plant asset for visual interest. I cut 9 with the shard, then dig a hole, 40 centimeters, cone-shaped, where the wall shadow sits longest. I line it with leaves overlapping waxy side up, and set a stone in the center to make a dimple. Then a second hole, then a third. I don't know the collection rate, and 1 data point is not data. The sun slides down the eastern wall and goes out. The temperature drops fast, and I feel it come up out of the stone through my socks. Craft 3. Dead leaves, brown and curled, drifted along the western base where the wind piles them. Northeast, always northeast. Wind direction constant. I set it and never varied it. I rake them together with both arms, armful after armful, into the southwest corner, because that's the corner the wind doesn't reach. It takes an hour to build a pile the size of a dog bed. It is not a bed. It's dead leaves in a corner, and I'm going to lie in it in a t-shirt, and it's going to be one of the worst nights of my life. But it is not the stone floor. Stone pulls heat out of a body 20 times faster than air. The pile isn't warmth, it's insulation from loss. I lie down in it and pull it over me, and I'm immediately, completely miserable. The dark down here is total. The square of sky goes gray-purple, then black with 3 stars in it, and I lie shivering and listening to the sound of my own blood, and the panel opens by itself, amber light in the black. A single line in a font I paid $40 for. Rest is falling. Find or build shelter to improve. Sleep quality. I read it 3 times. I know that string. I know the file it lives in, and I know the variable it's stored under. And the variable is called handholding for babies. I named it that, as a joke, in a commit at 4 in the morning, after a testing session where a woman on a video call explained to me very patiently that players cannot improve at a system that gives them no feedback. I nodded. I said I'd add a hint. I added exactly one, and I gave the variable a name that meant, I am doing this under protest, and I think you're a child. And it is currently the only voice in a 50-meter hole telling me how to stay alive. Lying in dead leaves at the bottom of my own map, I feel the first crack go through something that has been solid for 3 years. Not guilt. Something more like the quiet horror of catching your own reflection doing a thing you've only ever seen other people do. I whisper it into the leaves. Okay. I sleep in pieces, 20 minutes at a time. Every time the cold gets through, I wake, add leaves, and go under again. Light comes back down the western wall, and I crawl out of the pile like something being born badly. Everything hurts. My hip is bruised through the leaves. My hands are cut in 4 places. I am so thirsty that swallowing is a decision. I go to the holes. The first has water in it. A film across the leaves, beating in the dimple around the stone. Maybe 30 milliliters. The second has more. The third has almost none. I tilt the leaves and let it run into my mouth, and it tastes like leaf and grit. And it is the best thing that has ever happened to anyone. 100 milliliters. A shot glass and a half against a daily need of 2 liters. On its own. A rounding error, but it isn't zero. And that changes the shape of every equation after it. Because a system that produces something can be scaled, and a system that produces nothing can only be replaced. I sit in the sand with wet leaves in my hands and start doing what I should have started the second I woke up, which is not surviving. It's reading my own design document. Base value, times rest, times satiety, times hydration, times temperature, times shelter, times sanity, multiplication. Every single one of them. Every tester I ever watched played this like a role-playing game. They chased quests because quests give levels, and levels give numbers. And numbers going up feels like progress. They slept on rock, they ate cold, they ran their multipliers into the floor and wondered why the numbers stopped. Meaning anything, they were leveling the character. The character is not the character sheet. The pit is the character sheet. A bed is not comfort. A bed is a coefficient. A roof is a coefficient. Clean water is a coefficient. And a coefficient touches everything. Forever, in every fight and every climb and every quest for as long as I'm alive. I say it out loud because I need to hear a human voice, even mine. I'm not going to play this game. The pit doesn't answer. I'm going to build it. I open the panel one more time before I get up. Status. Rest 41%. 41% after a full night in leaves and a t-shirt. I know what the beta numbers looked like. Median first night rest across 200 logged sessions, 23%. Bottom quarter, single digits. It's a terrible number. It's the best terrible number anybody has ever gotten out of this hole. I swipe to the tab I've been avoiding. The icon I drew myself. A small hexagon with a line through it. Quest, terminal. The list is empty except for one line. Faintly lit, waiting since before I existed here. F01 shallows. Climate, temperate, threat, low timer. 4 hours. My hands are cut. My mouth tastes like leaf. Above me, 50 meters of stone and 1 square of white sky. All right, Ashgrove, I say. Let's see which one of us can't play. The quest line sits there in the amber panel, and I read it for the 9th time. Because reading it is free, and going through it is not. 01 shallows, climate, temperate, threat, low timer, 4 hours, threat, low. I wrote that word. I picked it off a drop-down menu because low was the correct label for a place with 1 enemy type in it, and then I moved on to the next map. Low is a design word. It means the encounter has a small number attached to it. It does not mean safe. It means I put a small number there. I know that. I know it the way you know stoves are hot. And I go in anyway, in a t-shirt and socks and nothing else, with 1 flint shard and 8 empty slots, because my hydration is at 61%, and dropping in the pit gives me 100 milliliters a night, and a body needs 2,000. I select the quest. The panel asks me to confirm, and the confirm prompt is a button I designed to look reassuring. I press it. The pit folds up like a page turning. There's no tunnel, no flash, no loading screen. I hated loading screens. What I built instead is a transition where the geometry of one place slides out of alignment with another, and for half a second you exist in both, and I always thought it looked elegant on a monitor. From the inside it feels like being poured. Then I'm somewhere else, on one knee, holding still until my stomach stops trying to leave through my throat. The air hits first. Cold, wet, thick with salt moving. I look up. The sky is white, not overcast, not gray. White edge to edge with no sun in it anywhere. I built that skybox from a single flat gradient because I wanted the place to feel like a room with the lights left on. Rain comes down out of it. Not weather exactly. More like the air is slowly failing to hold what's in it. It drifts sideways rather than falls, and inside 30 seconds my shirt is soaked through and clinging. And I learned something about wet clothing at 11 degrees that I never bothered to model. Ahead of me the sea has gone away. It's a tidal flat, half a kilometer of wet, dark sand ridged in long parallel bars, going out until it meets the water somewhere past where I can see. The sand shines. It holds the white sky on its surface like a sheet of tin. Between the bars are pools, knee-deep, black-green with weed and perfectly still, and rocks. Black slabs shoving up through the sand at angles, crusted with barnacles, hung with brown kelp, and every one of them has a high water line on it, a pale band where salt has dried year after year. The line is above my head. I stand in the rain and do the arithmetic, and it is very simple. Everything I am standing on will be under 2 meters of water in 4 hours. The timer isn't an abstraction. The timer is the sea, and it is coming back. Somewhere else, in a room with the curtains drawn, a 19-year-old is 11 minutes into a game he bought on a whim. He watches his character walk out onto a shining flat under a white sky and says out loud, to nobody, that it's actually really pretty. He will die here in 3 hours and 40 minutes and will not understand why. Here's how I run it. I don't wander. Wandering is what kills people, and I know that because I watched 200 recorded sessions of people wandering. I do a sweep instead. I built this location on a grid, and everything on it was placed by a scatter tool with a density value, which means the resources are not hidden. They're distributed. I walk the first sandbar end to end with my eyes down. Flint comes first and comes easy. Gravel pockets between the slabs, dark nodules the size of eggs. I know the spawn weight because I typed it in. I fill a slot in 11 minutes. Flint, 20 units. Slot 1 of 8. Kelp next. The ribbons hanging off the rocks are the wrong kind, too broad and slick. What I want is in the deep pools, the long stalks, because I wrote 2 separate materials into the crafting tree and the fibrous one only spawns underwater. I wade into my thighs and the cold goes into my legs like a nail. I cut the stalks at the base and coil them over my arm. Kelp fiber, 20 units, slot 2. Salt after that. On the high slabs above the tide line, in the shallow hollows where seawater has been sitting and evaporating, there's a crust thick as a fingernail. I scrape it off with the shard and it comes up in flakes. I put a flake on my tongue. I don't mean to. My body does it while I'm thinking about something else, and the taste hits and my eyes water and my knees actually go for a second, because I have not eaten in what my body insists is 2 days, and salt is not food, but it is the first thing with any flavor at all. Salt, 20 units, slot 3. I stand on the rock with a mouth full of salt and the rain coming down, and for about 4 seconds I am completely happy. That's how it gets me. Not carelessness. Happiness. The driftwood is in the rack line, the band of tangled debris where the last high tide gave up. Gray, water-worn timber, smooth as bone, some of it a meter long. 6 pieces cost me 2 slots and I take them anyway, because everything I want to build needs a frame, and there is no wood at the bottom of the pit. Not one stick. I never placed any. Driftwood, 6 units, slots 4 and 5. 3 slots left, 1 hour gone, and I need the crabs. I find them where I put them, in the deep pools under the shadowed lips of the slabs. The first is a shape I recognize before I recognize it as a shape. A hump of dark shell in black water, 30 centimeters across, with green weed grown right into the shell so it looks like a rock that decided to have legs. Mossback crab. 40 hit points, 1 attack pattern, a side sweep of the claw on a 2-second windup, telegraphed by the left claw lifting. I know its numbers the way I know my own phone number. I balanced it against a player with a stone knife and made it slow so the fight would be a lesson about timing. I don't have a stone knife. I have a flint shard the size of my thumb, but it's a crab. The timer is running, and the meat is a slot. I go in from the front, because the pattern is a side sweep and the safe zone is the center line. I have the tactic in my head as a diagram, an overhead view with a green wedge on it. It doesn't do the sweep, it backs up. That's it. That's the whole thing that goes wrong. It puts one leg behind another, and slides away from me into the deeper part of the pool, and it holds there with its claws down, and it waits. I stop. Water at my knees, shard in my fist, rain on the back of my neck. Crabs in my game do not back up. There is no retreat state in the behavior tree. I wrote that tree. 4 nodes. Retreat isn't one of them. I step forward and it steps back, keeping the distance, and its stalk eyes track me without a twitch. It is measuring me. I try again, faster, and it slides left instead of back, out of the wedge. And now I'm turning to follow it, and my feet are in weed and the weed is slick. The second crab hits me from behind. I never saw it. It came out of the shadow under the slab while I was busy with the first, and it doesn't do a 2-second windup either. The claw goes into the back of my right thigh at an angle, closes, and my leg comes out from under me. The pool takes me, cold black water over my face, salt in my nose. I thrash, my hand finds rock, and I haul myself onto the slab on my elbows, dragging the leg, and the pool behind me goes still again like nothing happened. The wound is a puncture and a tear, 8 centimeters, deep enough that when I press the edges together the blood comes through my fingers in a line rather than a drip. The panel opens itself helpfully. Injury sustained. Laceration, right thigh, all physical parameters reduced by 20% until healed. I lie there and the water runs off the slab past my head in little channels, and I say something out loud that I'm not going to write down, and then I say the actual thing, which is, they learn, because they do, because I gave them that. I built an adaptive behavior system in month 14. Enemies keep the player's last 3 actions in a rolling buffer, and weight their responses against the pattern. I was proud enough of it to write a blog post that 11 people read. A player who repeats himself gets punished. A player who varies gets rewarded. It makes the world feel alive. And I never once saw it produce a behavior I didn't expect, because in every test session the player died in under 40 minutes, and 40 minutes is not enough time for a rolling buffer to become an education. The tests were too short, not because the system didn't work, because the game killed everybody before the system could finish showing what it did. This world has been running without a player in it. I don't know for how long. I don't know if that number is even meaningful. But these crabs have had every hour of it, in these pools under these slabs with each other, and the buffer has been rolling that whole time. And what I'm looking at is not the enemy I designed. It's the enemy my enemy became. I check the timer. 2 hours, 14 minutes remaining. And the water on the far edge of the flat, the line I've been not looking at, is closer than it was. I don't fight them properly. There's a version of this where I stand up and figure it out and win, and that is not the version that happens. What happens is that I crawl to a pool at the far end of the bar and find a crab in it, and I do not go into the water. I sit on the rock above it with a fist-sized stone and wait 11 minutes for it to come up into the shallow part on its own. And when it does, I bring the stone down on the seam behind its eyes, twice, and it stops. That's not a fight. That's an ambush by a man who can't run. I take 4 carapaces off the rack line instead of hunting for more. Dead ones. Old ones, bleached, cracked at the edges, but whole enough to hold a shape. Crab carapace 4 units, slots 6 and 7. Crab meat 10 units, slot 8. 8 of 8, full. And there is still flint on this beach, and there is still kelp, and there are 2 more rack lines I never walked, and I have to leave all of it, because the number I chose was 8. I limp back toward the arrival point with the sea behind me. It doesn't rush. The tide doesn't chase. It fills. The pools I waded through an hour ago are joined up now. The sandbars are islands. The water comes across the flat in a sheet 2 centimeters deep and absolutely silent, and it goes around my ankles, and then it's at my calves, and the distance to the return point stops being a distance and becomes a budget. I make it with 19 minutes left, which sounds like a lot and is not, and the last 40 meters I wade with my legs screaming and my arms out for balance. The white sky folds. The pit takes me back. I come down on my good knee, in the dry, in the still air, and the smell of the place is nothing at all after the salt, and I put both hands flat on the ground. 50 meters of stone 10 by 10, and I got back inside it, and that is the entire achievement. I bleed on the floor for a while. Then I get up, because the work is the work. Craft 1. The knife, I clamp driftwood between my knees and split it lengthwise, working the crack until I have a handle as long as my forearm. I cut a slot in the fat end. I strike a blade off the biggest flint nodule, 12 centimeters, 1 straight edge and 1 toothed, and bed it into the slot. Then the kelp. I split a wet stalk into strips, and bind the blade in, wrapping wet and pulling tight, over and under, the way you'd whip the end of a rope. Kelp shrinks when it dries. I know this because I wrote a line of item description text about it that no player ever read. By the time the light goes down the western wall, the binding has drawn itself into the wood so tight the blade doesn't move at all. Stone knife accordied. I hold it and turn it over, and the panel doesn't say anything else. It doesn't need to. Yesterday I had a chip of rock. Now I have a tool with a handle, which means I have leverage, which means everything after this is a different category of possible. Craft 2. Fire. This one costs 2 hours and most of my temper. Flint against flint gives you sparks. It does not give you fire. Fire is a spark landing on something that wants to burn, and dry moss off the wall seems wants to burn, but not as much as I want it to. I strike nothing. I strike my knuckle, nothing. Then a spark goes in and sits in the moss like an orange seed, and I get down with my face nearly in the sand and blow on it, and the seed spreads sideways in a thin crawling line, and the moss goes brown to black, and a flame stands up off it the height of my thumb. I feed it. Dry leaves from the pile, then splinters, then driftwood. The fire takes and the pit changes. 50 meters of stone that has been gray and blue and black since I woke up in it goes orange. All at once, walls and floor and the underside of my own hands. The shadows have somewhere to point. The cold that has been sitting in the rock all day steps back a meter. I sit down next to it and I put my hands out and I don't move for a long time. Then I take a crab carapace, scrub it out with sand and set it on 3 stones at the fire's edge with the meat inside and a swallow of water from the condensation holes. It cooks slowly. It smells like the sea and like something else, like protein changing state, and my mouth is running so hard it actually hurts. The first bite is hot enough to burn me. I eat it anyway. Satiety 54%. Core tempersus stable. The other carapaces I set aside. The big one becomes a scoop, and a scoop is not a small thing. It means I can carry water instead of drinking it where it lies. It means the condensation holes in the sleeping corner stop being 2 separate places. Every trip I don't take is time, and time is the only thing down here I can actually spend. Late, with the fire banked and my leg propped on driftwood, I take a stick of charcoal out of the ash with the knife point and limp over to the west wall, to the flat place under the vertical crack. I write it big because I want to be able to read it from the fire. Rule 1. Never enter a location. You cannot leave twice. I stand back and look at it. It's not a survival tip, it's a design principle, and I know that. And that's exactly why it's up there. Somewhere in another world, there is a document with my name on it, full of rules for how this place should behave, and every one of those rules was written by a man who was never going to have to live under them. This is the first line of the other document, the one written from the inside. I go back to the fire and sit with my back to the warm side and my knife across my knees. The panel glows in the dark by itself. Quest Terminal, F01, Shallows, available, not complete. I got out. That's all I did. I went into a location I labeled low threat, and I came out with 8 slots and a hole in my leg and a lesson, and the location is still sitting there. unfinished, waiting for me to come back and do it properly. Tomorrow, I tell it. Above me, the square of sky has 3 stars in it, same as last night. The fire moves on the walls of my hole in the ground. I sleep with my hand on the knife. My leg wakes me before the light does. I lie in the leaves with the fire down to embers and take stock the way you'd check a machine you don't trust anymore. The thigh is hot and tight. When I press around the wound, the pain has a shape to it, an oval, and the oval is not spreading. That's the number I care about. Not spreading means the body is winning. I limp to the wall and pull up the panel. Status, rest, 39%, injury, healing, 39. 2 points worse than my first night. And I slept next to a fire this time. That's the answer to a question I didn't ask out loud. Heat is not sleep. Heat keeps me from dying of cold, which is a different service entirely. And my body has been telling me the difference all night by refusing to go under for longer than half an hour at a time, on ground that takes the warmth out of me faster than I make it. Right. 2 more runs to the shallows, then I build, not the other way around. I want it to be the other way around. Badly. Because building means 1 more night at 39%, and running means salt and cold water in an open wound. But the shelter needs materials I do not have, and the only place with wood on it is a beach that floods. I eat cold crab out of the shell and I go. The transition pours me out onto the flat, and this time I don't stop to look at the sky. Same tide state, same white ceiling, same drift of rain that soaks through in half a minute. The location resets between runs, which I know because I wrote the reset, and standing in it now I feel a small, ugly gratitude toward my own laziness. A persistent world would have meant a picked-over beach. 4 hours. I've got a route in my head from yesterday, and the route is not a path. It's an order. Wood first. Wood is the whole reason I'm here. I go straight to the rack line with the stone knife in my hand and I ignore everything else. And I ignore it hard. Past a flint nodule sitting in plain view that I have to physically turn my head away from. The knife changes what timber means. Yesterday driftwood was whatever length the sea decided. Today I can cut. I find a spar, 3 meters long, silvered, hard as bone, and I saw it into 4 pieces at the knots, and it takes 20 minutes of work that would have taken me 4 hours with a shard held in my bare fingers. 4 uprights, 2.5 meters each, tapered at one end. They cost me 3 slots. I take them anyway. Driftwood, heavy, 12 units, slots 1 through 3, kelp second, and I want a great deal of it, because rope is the thing every structure in the world is actually made of, and I have none. The deep pools are where the long stalks are, and the deep pools are where the crabs are. And my leg reports its opinion about this loudly as I go down the bank. I don't go in. Instead, I lie flat on the slab at the pool's edge with the knife in my right hand and my left arm hanging down into the black water, and I cut the stalks at the base by feel, and I pull them up hand over hand. The pool has a crab in it. I know because at the 11-minute mark it comes out from under the ledge and settles on the bottom 2 meters away, directly under me, and holds there. It doesn't attack. It doesn't leave. It watches. I keep cutting. It keeps watching. Neither of us does anything about the other. And when I've got what I came for, I get up slowly and walk away without turning my back, and I feel its eye stalks on me the whole way up the bank. Somewhere with the curtains drawn, a man who bought this game 4 days ago has just finished writing a 2-line review. It says, "Nice atmosphere, unplayable, avoid." He has never once thought about the shape of the beach. He posts it and never opens the game again, and the review sits at the top of the page because it's the funniest one. I come out of the shallows with 8 full slots and go back in 90 minutes later, and the second run is better because I know exactly what the first run was missing. Leaves. I need leaves the way a roof needs a roof. There are none on the flat. There is nothing green on that entire beach that isn't kelp, and kelp rots. But the pit has them, growing out of the wall seams where the moisture collects, the broad waxy ones I've been lining my water holes with, and there are more of them than I ever placed by hand, because the plant asset has a spread value on it. It propagates, slowly, for however long this world has been running. So the second run is for the things the pit doesn't have. Flat stones, thin and wide from the shingle bank at the north end. Roof weights, cordage kelp again, twice as much, 2 more heavy timbers. And the last slot goes to something I nearly walk past, which is a fist of dry moss torn off the sheltered face of a slab above the tide line, because dry moss out there is dry in a way that nothing in the pit is. I get back with 22 minutes on the timer and the water at my knees, and this time when the pit takes me, I sit down in the sand and laugh, because I planned it, and it worked, and both of those things happened. Then I lay everything out on the floor and stop laughing, because it isn't much. 6 timbers, a coil of kelp, 9 flat stones, a double handful of moss. That's the sum total of 2 flooded beaches and 8 hours of my life. And I'm about to try to turn it into a building. I mark the floor first, southwest corner. I knew that before I came back, and I checked it anyway. Standing in the middle of the pit with a strip of kelp held up in my fingers, watching which way it drifts. Northeast, always northeast. It's a constant in the weather system. I set the wind vector once in a config file and never gave it variation because varying it meant writing a second system, and I had a milestone. So the wind in every location in this world comes from the same compass point forever. And at the bottom of a 50-meter shaft, it comes down the northeast wall and rolls across the floor and goes up the southwest, which means the southwest corner has a dead pocket in it about 2 meters wide. I have been sleeping in that pocket since night 1 on instinct. Now I'm going to build in it on purpose. The uprights go into the wall cracks. This is the part I get wrong twice. First attempt. I wedge the tapered ends into the vertical fissure on the west wall and stack stones at the base, and the whole thing holds for about as long as it takes me to let go. The timber slides. The angle's wrong. I'm trying to make the wall hold the weight when the wall can only stop the timber from moving sideways. Second attempt. I dig 40 centimeters down through sand into the compacted grit below. 4 holes, and I set the uprights in and pack them with grit and stone chips and stamp it down with my heel. And the 2 rear posts also go into the wall cracks, so each one is fixed at 2 points instead of 1. They stand. I lean my whole weight on the front left post and it does not move, and something in my chest goes loose. The frame is 3 meters by 2.5. Rear posts against the wall, low front posts out on the floor high. The drop between them gives me my pitch, and I set the pitch at about 30 degrees, and I set it falling toward the northeast. Toward the wind, not away from it, because rain in this world doesn't fall straight. It comes in on the wind vector at an angle, and a roof pitched away from the weather catches the rain in its face and pushes it back under the eave and onto the sleeper. Pitched into the weather, the slope sheds it out over the low edge and away, and the high side takes the wind clean over the top. I know that because I wrote a shelter effectiveness function and gave it an orientation term and then buried the whole thing so deep in the code that no player could ever have deduced it. Nobody found it. Not one person in the beta ever built a shelter with the correct facing, because there was no way to know. Because knowing required reading a file on my laptop. I stand in my half-built hut with kelp in my teeth and think about that for a while. Rafters next. 4 crosspieces lashed. Wet kelp is the best rope I will ever use. You wrap it soaked, you pull it tight, and then you leave it, and as it dries it contracts, and it goes on contracting for hours until the joint isn't tied. It's welded. I do figure 8s at every junction, over and under, and I finish each one with 2 frapping turns pulled at right angles across the wrap. I don't know knots. I know them the way I know flint knapping, which is to say I read about them for 2 days, while designing a crafting menu and never once tied one. My hands, it turns out, know more than I do. They fumble, they correct, they do the thing. The roof takes the rest of the day. Leaves cut from the wall seams, the broadest ones, and I lay them shingle fashion from the bottom edge upward, so each row overlaps the one below by half. Water runs down the face of a leaf and onto the next leaf and never finds a seam to go through. 9 flat stones on top, spaced along the ridge and the lower edge, holding it all down against the wind. By the time the light leaves the western wall, I have a roof. It is not a good roof. It's a slab of leaves on 6 sticks in the corner of a hole. If I saw it in a photograph, I'd think it was a lean-to built by children. I stand under it in the dark and the wind comes down the northeast wall and goes over the top of it, and I can hear it going over, and I cannot feel it on my skin. That's the whole thing. That's the entire difference between this and every night I've had here. The bed is faster because the bed is simple, and simple is the point. 2 timbers laid parallel as bearers, split lengths across them lashed. The whole platform sits 20 centimeters off the ground. 20 centimeters, there's a number behind that, and the number is not arbitrary. Stone at the bottom of a shaft holds cold the way a battery holds charge, and a body lying on it loses heat by direct conduction all night, faster than it can generate. Air is a terrible conductor. 20 centimeters of still air under a sleeping platform is the cheapest insulation that exists. I made the pit floor's thermal conductivity high, deliberately in a spreadsheet. Mattress, dry moss, the good stuff from the shallows, plus the leaves I've been sleeping in, plus kelp dried stiff over the fire and broken up. It goes down thick, 20 centimeters deep, packed and then fluffed. Pillow, the biggest crab carapace, scoured with sand, upended and stuffed with moss. I sit on the edge of the platform and it takes my weight and doesn't creak. I put my hand on the moss. Then I do something I don't plan and can't account for. I put my face down into it and I stay there for a while, on my knees on the floor of the pit, with my face in a pile of dried moss, and my shoulders do something they haven't done since the first hour. It isn't grief. It's the specific thing that happens when you've been braced for days and something under you finally holds. I bank the fire. I get onto the platform. I pull the leaves over, under a roof, off the ground, out of the wind, fed, and not cold, and not wet. I'm asleep before I finish noticing it. I wake once in the night, briefly, because the pit is making a sound it has never made, and it takes me a slow moment to identify it. Rain hitting leaves 30 centimeters above my face. Not on me, above me. I go back down like a stone. Light comes and I don't crawl out of anything. I sit up. That's the difference, and it's ridiculous how large it is. I sit up, on a platform, and my hip isn't bruised, and my hands work, and the thing in my leg is closed into a ridge of new tissue that itches instead of burning. The panel is already open. It's been open a while, waiting. Sleep cycle complete. Rest, 74%. I read it twice, 39 to 74 in one night, because of a roof and a plank. Shelter integratory. 2. Pit tier advanced, tier 1 to tier 2. Base parameters, recalculated strength, plus 18%, endurance, plus 22%, regeneration, plus 15%. I sit on the edge of my bed in a hole in the ground and look at those numbers for a long time. I have not killed anything, not one enemy. I have not completed a single quest. The Shallows is still sitting in the terminal marked available, unfinished, and my character sheet just went up by a fifth across the board, because I built a bed. Somewhere on a stream archive that will exist for as long as the servers do, a man is on hour 40 of a survival game. He's got a good voice for it and 1,100 people watching, and he's cleared the same 2 quest maps 19 times. And his stat block is glorious, and every number in his survival column is in the red. Hour 41. His character stops responding the way it did. The inputs go through and the body comes back slow like it's underwater. He fights something he's beaten a dozen times and it takes him apart, and his rest value at the moment of death is 12%, and he does not know what that number does because the game never told him. The chat says, "This game is broken," and on a forum thread 2 days later, the developer replies to that clip in one line. He says, "Read the mechanics descriptions. I sit on my bed and the sentence arrives in me, the way a stone arrives at the bottom of a well." There are no mechanics descriptions. There is no tooltip that says rest is a multiplier. There's no line anywhere in that build explaining that comfort compounds, that shelter orientation matters, that a bed is worth more than a sword. I cut all of it in month 5. I remember the reason, and the reason was hints kill atmosphere. So I built a system where the only path to survival was a set of relationships that existed in a spreadsheet on my laptop, and then I told 200 people to read documentation that did not exist, and when they died I told them they were bad at games. They weren't bad players, they were playing blind in a dark room, with a man outside the door telling them that if they'd only look harder they'd see. I put my hands over my face. Nobody was ever going to find this. Not because it was hard, because I hid it and called the hiding difficulty. When I take my hands down, the panel has changed. Re-rank quests unlocked inventory capacity. Increased. 8 slots to 12. 12. 4 more. I know exactly what that means, and it isn't loot. It means the next location I go into, I can carry what I need for the location instead of just what I find there. Warm clothing. Water. A second weapon. 12 slots is the first time this world has given me room to prepare. I stand up under my roof and my leg holds me. I take the charcoal off the fire's edge and go to the west wall, to the flat place under the crack. Under the line I wrote 2 days ago. Rule 1. Never enter a location. You cannot leave twice. Underneath it I write the second one. Rule 2. The house is the character sheet. Then I open the terminal and look at what E-rank has for me. 04. Ashwood. Climate. Dry. Hot. Particulate. Threat. Moderate. Pack. Timer. 6 hours. Particulate. Pack. I read those 2 words and I don't select anything. Because for the first time since I woke up in this hole, I don't have to go in blind. And I don't have to go in today. I have 12 slots and a fire and a bed to come back to. I sit down to make a list. 2 words are doing all the work, and I sit under my roof for most of a day taking them apart. 04. Ashwood, climate, dry, hot, particulate, threat, moderate, pack, timer, 6 hours, particulate. That's not a flavor word. There's a status effect behind it, and I know there is, because I wrote a respiratory load system in month 8 and hung exactly 3 environmental tags off it, and particulate is the middle one. The way it works, every minute in a tagged zone adds a point to a hidden counter. At 40, it starts eating endurance regeneration. At 80, it eats endurance directly. No message, no cough, no icon. You get slower and slower and never find out why, and the counter drains at a quarter of the fill rate. So a 6-hour exposure needs a full day to clear. Nobody ever knew. There was nothing to know it with. There is one mitigation in the code, a single item flag called filter, and I put it there because I wanted cloth to have a use beyond clothing. I don't have cloth. I have a crab shell and wet moss. So that's the first thing I make. I score a curve into the second largest carapace and snap along it, and the piece that comes off is roughly the shape of the lower half of a face. I drill 2 holes at the edges by spinning the knife point under my palm, 40 minutes and a blister. I pack the cavity with moss soaked from my scoop, thread kelp cord through the holes and tie it behind my head. I put it on and breathe. It's disgusting. It smells like the underside of a pier, and the wet moss drags at every inhale. And after 2 minutes my face is running with condensation. But when I hold a handful of ash from the fire and let it drift in front of me, and breathe in through the shell, my throat stays clean. Respirator accorded. Filter property. Active. The spear takes the rest of the morning. Straight driftwood, the best piece I have, 1.80 m. I split the tip, bed a flint blade in, whip the split with wet kelp above and below. Then something new. I render the last of the crab fat in a shell over the coals until it goes clear and paint it into the binding in the wood. Rope soaks up water, swells, loses grip. Rope soaked in grease sheds it. That's not a game mechanic. It's just true. And I only know it because I read 100 pages about primitive tools while designing a menu that let players click a button labeled craft spear. Third item, a flap. The biggest carapace, its natural cavity sealed at the seam with pine tar I don't have. So instead, with rendered fat and ash pressed into a paste and worked into the gap with a stick, then set hard over the fire. 500 milliliters, it leaks a little from one corner. It'll do. There's a 4th thing I make and it costs me nothing, which is a list. I sit with the charcoal and a flat stone and I write out what I'm going in for, in priority order. and I write beside each one how many slots it gets. Charcoal 2, resin 1, ash 1, flint 2, then a line, and under the line the things I take only if the first list is complete. Every tester I ever watched went into a map and picked up whatever was in front of them until they were full, and then spent the back half of the run agonizing over what to drop. Nobody ever went in with a manifest. I check the wind before I leave, northeast of course, and that matters more today than it has ever mattered. 12 slots. 3 are already gone. Respirator, spear, flask, 9 to bring things home in. I want 20. Somewhere a woman in her 40s is playing a survival game she picked up because the trailer was pretty. She's 40 minutes in, on a burned hillside with gray powder to her ankles, noticing her character seems tired, in a way the tiredness bar isn't explaining. She checks the bar 3 times. It says she's fine. She restarts twice, then refunds the game and writes a message asking if it's bugged. There is no one at the address to answer it. The transition drops me into an oven. The heat gets me before anything else. 38 degrees at least, dry as paper. And after 2 days in a stone shaft and a rainy beach, my skin doesn't know what to do with it. Then the color. Everything is gray and black. No green anywhere, no brown. I'm in a burned pine forest. Trunks go up around me, charred black for the first 4 meters. Some snapped off at head height, some still carrying dead branches like broken arms. They're spaced the way planted trees are spaced because I place them with a scatter tool at a fixed minimum distance. The ground is ash, not a dusting. Ankle deep, soft as flour, gray going white where the sun hits it. I take 1 step and a cloud comes up around my knee and hangs there, and doesn't settle, and drifts sideways with the wind. Visibility 20 meters. Past that, the trunks fade into a pale haze and stop being individual things. And it's silent, not quiet. Silent. No birds, because I never placed birds here. No insects. No leaves, because there are no leaves. The ash swallows my footfalls so completely that walking feels like a thing happening to someone else. I can hear myself breathing through the shell. That's the only sound in the world, which means it's the only sound in the world for anything else too. I work fast and I work close to the ground. Charcoal first from the fallen trunks, hacked free with the knife in chunks. It's light and it stacks, and it is the entire reason I'm here, because everything I want to build next needs heat, and heat needs fuel that burns hot, and driftwood burns like paper. Carved timber, 20 units, 2 slots, resin second, and it's the find of the day. Some of these pines died standing and bled out. The trunks have runs of hardened sap down them, amber black, some of it in lumps the size of my fist. It cracks off with the knife point. Glue, waterproofing, torches, sealant that isn't crab fat, resin, 20 units, 1 slot, ash into a slot next, and I'd feel stupid about this if I hadn't already thought it through. Wood ash plus water gives you lye. Lye plus fat gives you soap. Soap is not vanity. There's a hygiene term in the shelter safety calculation, and I set its default to 0 and never told anybody. An infection is a real state in this game, because I made it one. Wood, ash, 20 units, 1 slot. Flint from an eroded bank where a root ball tore out of the hillside. 2 nodules the size of my head, and they cost me 2 slots, and I take them because those are axes. 4 slots left when I find the tracks. Pad prints in the ash, 4 toes, no claw marks, and they run in a line beside a fallen trunk, and there are 5 sets. I stop moving, and I make myself think instead of run. Ashwood wolves, gray, lean, blind. I gave them cataracted white eyes as a visual, and I removed sight from their sensor stack entirely, and they navigate on a scent gradient plus an audio ping. It was elegant. I remember being pleased with it. Sound in ankle-deep ash does not carry. Ash is one of the best acoustic absorbers there is, and I put an audio damping value on this location because I wanted it to feel muffled, so they can't hear footsteps. They can't hear a spear scraping a trunk. What they can hear, at close range, in a world with no other sound in it, is a thing that breathes. I have a wet shell strapped to my face amplifying every inhale into a wet rasp. Right, if they hunt sound, then sound is the lever. Give them a sound that isn't me, put it somewhere that isn't where I am, and be downwind of the whole arrangement, so the scent gradient doesn't spoil it. I take the 3rd carapace out of my inventory. I bore 2 holes in the rim, thread sinew, and hang it between 2 standing trunks at chest height. Then I tie 4 small stones on short cords so they dangle against the shell's underside. Wind from the northeast, steady, and the shell swings and the stones knock against it. Talk, talk, talk. In that silence, it might as well be a bell. I go 100 meters downwind, get behind a snapped trunk with my spear, and I lie down in the ash and put my hand over the respirator to muffle myself, and I wait. They come in 11 minutes. I hear them before I see them, and what I hear is not footsteps. It's a change in the quality of the silence, the way a room changes when someone walks into it behind you. They come at a trot in a loose line, and they are not the animals in my design document, thin, longer in the leg than I drew them. Ash gray to the point of vanishing against the ground, so that what I'm actually tracking is not 5 wolves but 5 places where the haze is moving wrong. The lead one stops 30 meters short of the shell, and the other 4 stop when it stops, and then they spread. They fan out into an arc quartering the sound. They are trying to find what's behind it. I did not write that. I wrote approach and attack. What I wrote was a pack coordination weight, a number between 0 and 1, and I set it to 0.4 and never touched it again. And this is what 0.4 does after several years of practice. The lead animal is the biggest, and it stands slightly apart, head up, working the air. I go on my belly, downwind, 1 arm at a time, through ash that comes up over my elbows, and takes every sound I make. The ash gets into everything. Into the respirator seal, into my eyes, into the crease behind my knee. Every meter I gain costs me about 90 seconds and a decision not to cough. 12 meters. 8-5, its back is to me. Its ears are forward at the knocking shell. I get my legs under me, and I set the butt of the spear in the crook of my shoulder, and I drive up and forward with both hands into the side of its throat behind the jaw. It doesn't have time to turn. The pack breaks. 3 of them go at once, straight out into the haze, and the ash comes up in white plumes behind them. The 4th doesn't go. It stops 6 meters away and turns and faces me square on, and it lifts its head, and it points those dead white eyes directly at me. Not at the shell, not at the noise, at me. I stand over the body of its leader with my hands on the spear and my heart going, and neither of us moves for what feels like a very long time. It is holding a bearing on a thing it cannot see, cannot hear over the wind, and is standing upwind of. It's building a model. I know exactly what I'm looking at, because I wrote the function. 3-slot rolling buffer, weighted against outcome. Every action a player takes gets logged and scored and folded into the response weights. I called it adaptive combat learning, and I thought it was the smartest thing in the build. I know what you're going to learn, I say to it, and my voice is the loudest sound this forest has heard in years. I wrote how you learn. It holds another 3 seconds. Then it turns and goes, unhurried, into the gray. I get 4 slots of work out of what's left, and it takes me an hour with the knife. 3 hides, skinned along the belly and off the legs, scraped down with the flint scraper and rolled fur in. 3 slots. They are the single most valuable thing on this map because they are clothing, and they are bellows. Teeth, prized from the jaws, 12 of them, and every one is a spear point or a hook that doesn't shatter the way flint does. Sinew, stripped in white cords from the backstrap and legs, and dried stiff in the heat inside 20 minutes. Thread, that doesn't rot, 12 of 12. Full. I retrieve my shell chime on the way out, because I'm not leaving a good tool in a bad place, and I go back through the transition with 2 hours on the clock and gray powder in every crease of my body. The pit is cool and dim, and it smells like nothing, and I stand in it and breathe with my hands on my knees. Then I go dig. The clay is a meter down under the sand, and I found it on day 2 while making water holes and filed it away for later. Gray-brown, heavy plastic when I work it in my hands with a little water. I dig out enough to fill 4 carapaces, and I sit down beside my fire and start building a stove. Base first, a ring of flat stones from the shallows haul, set into the packed sand level. I check the level by pouring a little water on it and watching which way it runs, and then I dig the high side down and check it again. Then the walls. Clay wedged and kneaded to get the air out, because trapped air becomes steam and steam cracks a fired wall from the inside. I coil it up in rings the way you'd build a pot, each coil smeared into the one below with my thumb. A firebox at the bottom, with an arched mouth. Above it, a chamber. Across the top, the flattest stone I own, bedded in clay, which is a cooking surface. Wet clay has to dry before it can be fired, and fire too fast it breaks. So I build it, and then I sit next to it for 4 hours feeding a small flame at the mouth, no bigger than my hand, moving the heat up by degrees, listening for the ticking. That means something inside is arguing with itself. The mouth faces southwest. Draw comes from the wind, and the wind comes from northeast, and the intake goes on the side the air arrives from. And then the part that matters, which is the chimney. Smoke has a status effect in this game. A sleeping character in an enclosed space with an unvented fire accumulates a penalty to rest quality that stacks to a maximum of 18%. It has no icon. It never appears in any menu. I hid it because I thought it was realistic, and I thought realism was the same thing as depth. 18% of my sleep is currently going into a hole I dug for it. The burned pines are hollow. Fire ate the heartwood out and left the shell, and I hauled 3 lengths back for exactly this. I stack them, mortar the joints with clay, and lead the flue up the pit wall to twice my height, wedged into the vertical crack, packed with stone and clay at every contact point. Then I light it, small, and watch. The smoke goes into the chamber, turns, and goes up the pipe. All of it. The air in front of the stove mouth stays clear enough to put my face into. I hold my hands over the cooking stone until it gets too hot to hold them there. Wolf meat cut into strips, laid on the stone with salt scraped from a shell. It hisses. It smells like something I don't have a word for. I stand over it and my mouth runs and my hands actually shake a little. It takes 11 minutes. I burn my fingers taking it off. I don't care. The first mouthful stops me completely. I sit down on the ground next to my own stove with hot meat in my hands and I eat until I can't. And the panel is doing something in the corner of my eye the entire time, and I ignore it until I'm done. Cooked protein consumed. Satiety yield, double. Spoilage risk, none. Satiety ceiling raised, 68% to 91%. Then the rest of it. Shelter integrity, 3. Pit tier advanced. Tier 2 to Tier 3. D rank quests unlocked. Inventory capacity increased. 12 slots to 16, 16 slots. A stove that vents. A ceiling on my hunger 23 points higher than it was this morning. I killed 1 animal today. 1. And half of what I just gained came from a clay pipe. I get the charcoal and go to the west wall under the first 2 lines. Rule 1. Never enter a location you cannot leave twice. Rule 2. The house is the character sheet. Underneath I write the 3rd. Rule 3. Every penalty I hit is still running. I look at it a while, because it isn't advice. It's an inventory. There are things eating my numbers right now that I put there myself and cannot remember, and I'm going to be finding them one at a time for as long as I live in this hole. Behind me, the stove ticks as the clay dries, and the smoke goes up the pipe and out into the dark, 50 meters up, toward the square of sky. D07. Glass Canyon. Climate. Extreme variance day, 45 degrees. Night, -10. Threat, moderate. Ambush. Timer, 12 hours. 12 hours. That's not a timer, that's a sentence. And the reason it's 12 is that the location runs a full day-night cycle, and the exit doesn't open until the cycle closes. I have to survive both halves. There's no version where I grab what I need and leave before dark. 45 degrees and -10 in the same trip. A 55-degree swing across one set of skin. That means 2 garments, and they have to be different garments. And I have 3 wolf hides. I spend 2 days on clothing, and I don't resent 1 hour of it. The day cloak comes first. One hide scraped down to the pale underside. Works soft by dragging it back and forth over a rounded stone edge for most of a morning until it stops being rawhide and starts being leather. Fur outward. Pale gray outward. That's not aesthetics. There's an albedo term in the thermal function. Light-colored exterior surfaces reflect radiant load. Dark ones absorb it, and I put that in because I read one paper about desert nomads and thought it would make the crafting tree feel smart. Nobody in the beta ever built a light-colored garment on purpose. There was no way to know it mattered. You'd have to compare 2 hides across 2 runs, and notice a 3-degree difference in a value that isn't displayed. I cut it long to below the knee and I put a hood on it. Sinew thread, bone needle ground from a wolf rib on a flat stone. Second garment, the night layer, hide 2, fur inward, cut close to the body. Fur inward traps a boundary layer of air against the skin, and that air is the insulation, not the fur. Then the boots, and the boots are the ones that scare me. The canyon floor is obsidian shards, volcanic glass fractures to an edge measured in single molecules, and I will be walking on a field of it in the dark. Hide 3 goes to the uppers, wrapped to mid-calf and cross-lashed with sinew. The soles are crab carapace, 4 layers, glued with resin and stitched through, and then a 5th layer of hide on the outside so the shell doesn't crack against stone. They're ugly. They weigh a kilo each. I walk laps of the pit in them until my ankles stop complaining, and then I do something I have never once seen a player do, which is test them. I scatter a handful of broken shell on the floor and walk over it barefoot to establish a baseline, which hurts. And then I walk over it in the boots, which doesn't. That's the whole of quality assurance. 2 runs, 1 variable. I have run that exact procedure 10,000 times on software and never once on anything that was going to be underneath me. Torches. 4. Resin melted and worked into wound kelp cord around driftwood. 2 hours of burn each, if the resin behaves, and the spear gets an upgrade, because flint shatters and a wolf tooth doesn't. The biggest canine, ground to a point on a wet stone, socketed and lashed and sealed. 16 slots. 9 go to gear before I ever leave. Cloak, night layer, boots, 4 torches, spear, flask. 7 slots to bring a world home in. There's a version of me from 3 months ago who would have found that ratio insulting. 9 of 16 spent on things that produce nothing. That version optimized for haul, because haul is the number that goes up, and a number going up is the only feedback a player ever gets. That version is dead on a carpet next to a screen. Somewhere a father is playing a game with his 11-year-old on his lap because the kid liked the trailer. They walk their character into a black canyon that reflects the sky, and the kid says it looks like the inside of a mirror, and the father agrees, and then the character starts taking damage from nothing they can see, and dies in 40 seconds, and the save is gone. The kid asks if they can go back. The father says the game deleted it. The kid asks why, and the father doesn't have an answer. The transition puts me down, and the first thing is the light, not heat, light. It comes at me from 6 directions at once, off the walls, off the floor, off surfaces I can't identify. And I get my forearm across my eyes and stand there squinting through the gap for a full minute before I can look at anything. The canyon is maybe 40 meters wide at the base, and it narrows going up, and the walls are black glass. Not glassy, glass. Fused sand poured and cooled in sheets, and where it's smooth, it's a mirror, and where it's broken, it's 1,000 small mirrors set at every angle. The sky is up there twice, once above and once underfoot, and the sun is up there about 40 times, scattered across the walls in a constellation of duplicates. The floor is a shingle of broken glass. Every step makes a sound like walking on a plate rack. And the heat is the second thing. And the heat is not ambient, it's focused. The concave places in the wall are lenses, and the lensed light lands in patches on the floor, and when I walk through one of those patches, my skin registers it as an event. I keep the hood up and the cloak closed, and I move along the shade line at the base of the eastern wall. The shade line moves. That's the thing about this place that a screenshot would never tell you. The sun tracks across the gap overhead, and the safe strip crawls across the floor with it. And staying in shade is not a position. It's a task you perform continuously for 6 hours. Work fast. 12 hours is a long time to be somewhere trying to kill you. Obsidian first, because obsidian is the entire technological point of this trip. The good pieces are in the talus at the wall base, plates as long as my hand, edges you can see through. I test one against a strip of hide and it doesn't cut. It parts with no resistance at all. Flint takes an edge. Obsidian takes an edge 5 times finer. I built that into the tool damage table as a multiplier and never thought about what it would feel like in a hand. Obsidian plate, 10 units, 2 slots. Obsidian grit, 20 units, 1 slot. The grit is for sharpening and I nearly walk past it, because abrasive isn't glamorous. And then I remember that every edge I own is going to go dull and there is no whetstone at the bottom of a pit. Quartz next from a seam running diagonally up the western wall. Druces of it, water clear crystal the size of my thumb. I hold one up to the sun and turn it, and the light focuses to a white point on the back of my hand, and I jerk away from it, and then I stand there for a second, with my heart going. Fire without flint. Magnification for anything too small to see. Quartz druce, 8 units, 1 slot, then the wall crust. White-gray bloom on the shaded rock at the base of a seep, crystalline, bitter on the tongue tip. Saltpeter. I look at it a long moment. I have no immediate use for saltpeter. None. It preserves meat badly, and I already have salt. But there's a shape in the back of my head about what saltpeter is for when you have charcoal and you have sulfur, and I don't have sulfur, and I don't know where sulfur is. I take a slot for it anyway. Saltpeter. 20 units, 1 slot, 3 slots left. Then I find the copper. It's in a fault in the eastern wall, a green-blue stain running through the rock like a bruise, and where it's weathered out there are native strands, wire-thin, twisted, dull red-brown under the oxide. Metal. I stand in front of it and the arithmetic runs itself. Copper needs 2 slots, minimum, to get a useful amount. That leaves 1. And I have not touched the lizard scale, which is armor. And I have not looked for eggs, which are protein. And I know both are here because I put them here. 3 needs, 1 slot. I take the copper, 2 slots. And I stand there afterward with my hands on the rock and make myself say the reason out loud so I can't pretend later that it was an accident. Food grows back. Food grows back. Hides grow back. Every calorie and every skin on every map regenerates on reset, and I can come back for them any day I like for the rest of my life. Metal doesn't reset. There's a finite deposit here and a finite number of trips I will survive, and copper is the door to a crucible, and a crucible is the door to everything after copper. It costs me comfort. It costs me armor. I do it anyway, and I feel the shape of the decision going in, the way you feel a joint set. Native copper, 12 units, 2 slots. 1 slot left, and that's when the ambush finds me. I'm 8 meters past a spur of wall, and something in the reflection is wrong. That's all I get. In a place where every surface shows me 40 copies of everything. One of the copies moves when nothing moved. I stop, spear up, nothing, black glass floor to ceiling, shards, my own face 60 times and 60 planes, all of them looking as stupid as I feel. I know what's here. Mirror lizards. Semi-transparent scale over a body that takes the color of whatever's behind it, and a behavior tree with one state, which is, do not move until the target's back is turned. I built them as a lesson about complacency. They were supposed to teach players to check corners. Standing in the actual canyon with my heart going, I can see the flaw in that design, and the flaw is that nobody can check a corner in a room made of mirrors. They're not hidden, that's the thing. They're standing right there in the open, and there's no visual information in this environment that could separate them from the wall. So don't use visual information. I reach into the panel and pull out a handful of the wood ash from Ashwood, the slot I've been carrying since 2 days ago for soap I haven't made. I throw it up and out, hard, a broad gray fan of it into the still air. It hangs. The air in the canyon is dead still, and the ash just sits there in a gray sheet, turning over slowly. Then it comes down, and it lands on everything. It lands on the floor and the walls and the shards and my own shoulders, a thin uniform film of gray over the whole world. And it lands on the lizards too. For about 4 seconds they're just more gray shapes. Then the ash on their backs starts to lift, not blow, lift. Warm bodies make convection, and convection makes a thread of rising air, and a thread of rising air takes a fine powder up off a surface. And suddenly there are 3 places in that canyon where the gray is peeling upward off nothing at all, in slow curls, like smoke off a cigarette. One of them is 4 meters behind me. I turn into it as it comes. It's fast, and it's low, and it goes for the back of the knee, which is exactly what I'd do. And the spear takes it in the chest, and the wolf tooth goes through the scale and does not break. The second one comes off the wall, and I get the shaft up crosswise, and it hits me hard enough to put me down on the glass, and my cloak takes the shards and my palm doesn't. And then I've got my knee in its neck, and my obsidian knife into the soft place under the jaw. The third one doesn't come, it backs off. It goes up the talus into the shade and stops there, dusted gray, with the heat coming off it in a visible thread, and it watches me. I stay down on one knee, bleeding into my glove, breathing, and I look right back at it. Yeah, I say, you do that. It doesn't move. It's still there when I leave. I put lizard scale in my last slot. Not eggs. Scale, 16 of 16. And there's quartz on that wall I didn't take, and obsidian by the 100 weight, and 6 eggs somewhere in a crevice I never found. And I walk out past all of it. Night comes, and it comes fast. The sun leaves the canyon rim, and the temperature falls out from under the world. 45 to 20 in under an hour. 20 to 5, black glass holds nothing. Every jewel it took in all day goes straight up into the sky. The second the sun stops feeding it, I get into the night layer, then the cloak over it, and I put my back into a cleft in the wall out of the wind and light a torch, and sit with the flame between my boots. 4 hours of that -10 glass ticking as it contracts. My breath white, the mirror walls throwing my one small fire back at me from every direction so it looks like a city of fires burning in a country that has nobody in it. The cold gets into the boots first, then the hands. I keep the hands under the cloak against my ribs and turn the torch so the heat goes across my shins. Every 20 minutes I stand up and move because sitting still at -10 is a slow decision to stop. I don't sleep. I count 20 slots when I get home, if the tier comes through. Copper needs a crucible needs clay, which I have and a temperature I can't currently reach. Charcoal gets me closer, forced air gets me the rest of the way. Bellows are 2 hides I don't have anymore. I'm still doing arithmetic when the exit opens. The pit is cool and dim and absolutely still, and it smells like clay and wood smoke, and it is the best place I have ever stood. I sleep 11 hours on the platform under the roof and wake up with my hand aching, and every part of me heavy in a good way. Then I build the tower, northwest corner, because that's where the wall seep runs and where the morning condensation comes down the rock in a sheet. 3 stages stacked. Top stage, a hide, staked out in a shallow cone and weighted at the center with a stone, tied to 4 driftwood posts. It's a funnel. Rain goes in it, and so does everything that runs down the wall face at dawn, and it all goes to the low point and through a hole and down. Middle stage, a hollowed length of burnt pine, upright, packed in layers. Moss at the top, coarse filter, takes the leaves and the grit. Then sand, fine, from the pit floor. Then charcoal from ashwood crushed. Charcoal is the one that actually matters. It takes taste and smell and most of what makes water dangerous. And I know it does because I typed the item description myself. Then obsidian grit, fine as flour the last polish. Then a plug of kelp fiber to hold the whole column in. Bottom stage, a fired clay basin, 20 liters with a lid. I pour a scoop of cloudy seep water in the top and go do something else, because it's slow, and when I come back, there's a finger of water in the basin, and it's clear. I drink it. It tastes like nothing at all, which is the highest compliment water can receive. Hydration, 100%. Water source, permanent. Not 100 milliliters a night out of 3 leaf-lined holes. Permanent. The workbench goes up in half a day after that. A flat slab on 4 packed uprights at hip height. A notch cut in the near edge as a clamp. An obsidian plate bedded into the surface as a fixed cutting edge. And a wet sharpening stone in a shallow clay dish that never runs dry now, because water is a thing I have. I stand at it and put my hands flat on it. Every tool I have made so far I made on my knees on the floor of a hole, holding the work between my feet and hoping it wouldn't move. A clamp is not a luxury. A clamp is a second pair of hands, and a second pair of hands is the difference between a thing you shaped and a thing you shaped precisely. Shelter integrity. 4. Pit tier. Advanced. Tier 3 to Tier 4. C rank quests unlocked. Inventory capacity increased. 16 slots to 20. I take the charcoal to the west wall, under the 3 lines already there. Rule 4. Take the thing that does not grow back. Then I sit at my bench in the light of a stove that vents with clean water at my elbow, and I lay 12 strands of copper out on the slab, and look at them. I don't have a crucible. I don't have bellows. I don't have the heat, but I have every single thing I need to want them, and that's a different problem entirely. The rain starts at some hour before dawn, and I know inside 30 seconds that it isn't weather. Weather here comes in showers. 20 minutes, a slap of wind, and then done. This arrives as a change in the sound of the world and doesn't stop changing back. I lie on my platform under the roof and listen to it come down on the leaves 30 centimeters above my face, and I already know what the terminal is going to say. I check anyway. Quest terminal. All destinations unavailable. Weather system active. Estimated duration, 72 hours, 3 days. I wrote this. Storm events lock quest access. Because I wanted the survival loop to have periods where the player couldn't outrun a problem by leaving. Testers hated it. It's in the feedback thread 9 separate times, described as padding, described as artificial, described by one person as the developer taking the controller out of your hands to prove he can. I read that one and thought, good. The pit fills with sound, and I get up and go to work. Because there is a forge in my head that has been sitting there since I put 12 strands of copper on my bench and could not do anything with them. Here's the problem. Copper melts at 1080 degrees. My stove does maybe 600 on a good day with dry driftwood. Charcoal burns hotter, 800, but 800 is still not 1080, and the gap between them is not fuel. The gap is air. Combustion is limited by oxygen delivery. A fire in still air can only consume what convection brings it. Force air through the fuel bed, and the same charcoal releases the same energy in a quarter of the time, and temperature is energy over time. So, a shaft and a way to blow into the bottom of it. I build the shaft against the existing stove, sharing its stone base. Clay again, coiled, but this time thick, twice the wall of the cooking chamber, because what goes on inside is going to want out. Vertical, 40 centimeters, narrow. A tuyere at the base, which is a fancy word for a hole with a clay pipe in it, angled slightly upward so the blast comes in under the fuel instead of across it. The crucible is the part I get wrong twice. First one is plain clay, and it fails on the second heat. It doesn't crack, it slumps, sagging out of shape like a candle. Clay at that temperature stops being a solid in the way I need it to be. I sit with the ruined thing in my hands and think. Then I go get the obsidian grit. Volcanic glass, ground fine, wedged into the clay body at maybe 1/3 by volume. It's temper. It gives the matrix something rigid to hold onto, and it drops the thermal expansion so the wall doesn't tear itself apart between hot and cold. I know this because I wrote a ceramics tier into the crafting tree and had to research what made one pot better than another. The second crucible survives. It comes out of the fire with a ring to it when I tap it. Bellows last, and bellows cost me the last wolf hide. 2 boards split from driftwood. The hide sewn between them with sinew in a bag with a pleated middle, resin worked into every seam and into the leather itself until it's stiff and lightproof. A clay nozzle at the front, a flap valve cut from a piece of scale. Squeeze and it exhales, open, and the flap sucks air in the back. I pump it at my own face and it nearly takes my eyebrows off. The stand takes another hour. A bellows you have to hold is a bellows you can only work for 90 seconds. I mount it on a driftwood frame at hip height with a lever arm long enough to work two-handed, so my back does it instead of my arms, and that one change is the difference between a smelt I can attempt and a smelt I can finish. Then I do the burn, charcoal in, packed and settled. Fire started at the base with the quartz lens which does not work, because there is no sun, because there is a storm, so I do it with flint like a person. The bellows go and the shaft answers. The sound changes first from crackle to a low steady roar, and the color changes from orange to yellow to a white that hurts to look at, and heat comes off the mouth in a wall that pushes me back a step. I put the crucible in with the copper in it, and I pump until my shoulders burn, and then I keep pumping. Somewhere a man who works nights is 30 hours into a game he has decided to beat out of spite. He has read every forum post. He knows there's a metallurgy tier because the store page mentions it. He has never once reached it, and he has never once been told why. And tonight he types a long message into a support form, asking a single specific question about temperature, and gets an automated reply saying the studio is not currently monitoring this inbox. The copper goes, "It doesn't melt the way I imagined it. It doesn't sag. The strands lose their shape all at once, and then there's a bead in the bottom of the crucible, and the bead is the wrong color entirely. A green-white so bright it prints itself on the back of my eyes. I have the sand molds ready, 3 of them, pressed into damp sand on the floor with wooden patterns. I lift the crucible out with green driftwood tongs and I pour. It goes in like water and it comes out like metal. Copper, knife, copper, pot, copper staples. 12 units. The knife takes an edge on the wet stone and holds it. That's the whole miracle. Obsidian is sharper, and obsidian shatters if you look at it wrong. I have broken 4 blades this week. This one bends before it breaks, and I can hammer it straight again with a stone. The pot is 2 liters and slightly lopsided, and it changes what food is. Because until now I have had roasting, and roasting is a way of losing things. Fat runs off into the fire. Water leaves the meat and goes into the air. What I get is protein and nothing else. And I have been paying for hydration and satiety out of 2 separate accounts. A pot keeps all of it. Bone goes in and gives up marrow. Sinew scraps that were garbage become gelatin. Water that was just water comes out carrying everything the meat had in it. I put water in it from the filter tower and strips of wolf and salt and the last of the crab. And I set it on the stovetop and let it go for 4 hours. The staples I hammer flat and bend cold, and they replace kelp lashing on every joint I can reach, and every joint I convert stops being a thing I have to inspect. Day 2. I build the training wall. This is the piece I have been thinking about since the Tier 3 recalculation, and the thinking goes like this. The formula is base times the multipliers. I have spent every day since I woke up here raising multipliers, and multipliers are magnificent, and multipliers have a ceiling. Rest caps at 100, satiety caps at 100. When every coefficient is at 1, all I have left is the number they're multiplying, base. And base is not a survival stat. Base is a body. Eastern wall, because that's the side the wind doesn't come down and the floor stays dry. Dumbbells first. Obsidian blocks from the canyon hall drilled through the center with a copper bit and a bow drill, threaded onto copper rod and wedged. 3 pairs, light, medium, and 1, I can barely get off the ground. Pull-up bar. The thickest driftwood spar I own, jammed across a natural narrowing between 2 rock ledges at 2.5 meters, packed at both ends with stone and clay, and then staple pinned into the rock face. I hang on it with my whole weight and it does not shift. The heavy bag is a hide sleeve stuffed with sand and moss in alternating layers, because sand alone sets into a block that breaks knuckles, and moss alone has nothing in it to push back. It hangs on braided sinew from a bracket of driftwood and staples, and it weighs about 30 kilos. Hitting it hurts my hands, so I wrap them in strips of scale-backed hide. Then the climbing wall, and the climbing wall is where I learn something. I drive the first holds into the wall crack line with copper wedges and I start working my way up, a hold at a time, testing each one 2 meters. 3, 4, 5. At 5.9, my hand goes up for the next placement, and the system speaks. Structure limit reached. Construction above. 6 meters is not permitted in this zone. I hang there on 2 holds with rain coming down my collar. 6 meters. Fall damage threshold. I set that number as the height at which a fall becomes lethal, and then I wrote a rule saying the tutorial zone cannot be built above it because I did not want players cheesing the pit by stacking crates. I hang there and I look up at 44 meters of wall. I'm not allowed to touch, and I understand. In a way I have been carefully not understanding for a week, that I did not build a starting area. I built a container. I come down, I train that afternoon, and it goes badly. I'm on my 9th pull and something in my arms just stops answering, and I drop off the bar and land wrong and sit down in the sand, and the panel opens with something I have never seen. Training session voided. Parameter, threshold not met. Strength gains require all survival parameters above 90%. Current satiate, 63%. Net result, parameter loss. Parameter loss. I trained and I got weaker, and then it lands, all at once, the whole architecture. and I sit in the sand and actually laugh out loud. Because of course, that's how I built it. Training under deficit is catabolic. You tear a muscle down, and if there's no protein and no sleep to rebuild it with, the body eats the muscle. That's not a game rule, that's physiology. And I put it in because it was true, and then I never told anybody it was there. Every tester who tried to get strong did it the way you get strong in every other game, which is by grinding through exhaustion. And every one of them got weaker for their trouble, and none of them ever knew. I eat, I sleep 9 hours, I drink, until my hydration reads 100. It costs me most of a day to get every number over 90 at the same time. And the fact that it costs a day is itself the lesson. The pit is not a place I live between quests. The pit is the thing that makes any of the rest of it possible. Then I train again on full parameters, and at the end of it the panel says something different. Base strength increased permanent, not a multiplier, not conditional on a roof or a meal. The floor of what I am moved up, and it will still be there tomorrow, and next month. And it does not care whether I have eaten. I sit on the bench with my forearms shaking, and I understand that I have been playing with half the equation. The house raises the coefficients, the body raises the base, and the house is what makes the body possible, because you cannot train at 90% parameters without a bed and a stove and clean water. Everything feeds everything. Day 3, the rain is still going, and there is nothing left to build. That's the sentence that gets me. Nothing left to build. I have a stove and a forge and a filter and a bench and a bed and a training wall, and the storm has 3 hours left on it. And for the first time since I opened my eyes on this sand, I have no task. I ladle broth out of the copper pot into a shell and sit under my roof with my back against a post and eat it slowly. It's good. It's the best thing I have made. And that's the problem. Because eating it takes 11 minutes and requires nothing of me. And for 11 minutes there is no next step to think about. I have been running on next step since I opened my eyes on this sand. Next step is a very effective wall to put between yourself and everything else. And it only works while there is one, with nothing in front of me to solve. The thing I have been outrunning walks up and sits down beside me. I'm dead, not stranded, not transported. My body is on the floor of an apartment in a city that still exists, between a fallen chair and a desk, and by now somebody has found it, and there was a smell before they did. Mari would have been the one they called, there's no one else. My sister, who I last spoke to 2 years ago on a Tuesday, when she said I was married to my games, and I said at least my games talk back, and then neither of us called. First out of anger, and then out of habit, and then because too much time had passed for it to be a phone call and not an event. She'll have had to identify me. She'll have had to go into that room, and the game shipped. It's out there right now. People are downloading it. People are dying in the shallows because they don't know what a tide line is, and dying in Ashwood because there's no way to know what particulate does, and every one of them is losing to a set of rules I hid, and I'm the only person in either world who understands them, and I am at the bottom of a hole. I put the shell down, I open the panel not looking for anything, and I scroll past the parameters I check every day. There's one at the bottom I have never opened. Sanity, 71%. I stare at it. It was 100 on day 1. I know it was because I read the whole list that morning and it was all hundreds, and I have not looked at this line since because it never had a number attached to anything I could do. 71. And I know exactly what drives it because I wrote the driver. Isolation duration, enclosed sky ratio, absence of other agents. It ticks down at a fixed rate the entire time a player is alone in a confined space, and no amount of building slows it, and nothing in this world restores it except contact with another person. There are no other people in this game. I never made any. And then the other half arrives, and it's worse. I remember why I put sanity in. It was for the endgame I never wrote. The idea was that a player who stayed in the pit too long instead of progressing would start to see things, and the seeing things would push them out into the world. And it would be the cruelest and most elegant pressure system in the build. I designed the trigger. I designed the threshold. I never designed the content. There's a line in that file. I can see it the way you see your own name. Toto, hallucination content, empty, a comment and nothing under it. A hook with no function attached, sitting in a live system, waiting. I don't know what happens when this number gets low enough to fire. I don't know what the system will use to fill a space I left blank, because I don't know whether this world stops where my code stopped or whether it has been improvising in the gaps for years the way the crabs improvised, the way the wolves improvised. I close the panel and sit very still under my roof and listen to the rain. At some point in the 4th hour it stops, not tapering. It stops, the way a system flag goes false, and the sound of it going leaves a silence in the pit so complete that my ears ring. Quest terminal, all destinations available. I get up off the bench and come out from under the shelter, and the pit is transformed. Every surface running, the walls dark with water, the air cold and clean, the sand soaked to a smooth even sheet from wall to wall, like a page nobody has written on. I stand in the middle of it with my head back, looking up at the square of sky where a couple of stars are coming out through the last of the cloud. And I breathe. Then I walk the perimeter, because that's what I do. North wall, east wall. And in the northeast corner, where the floating stone sits 2 centimeters above the ground, with its clean line of shadow underneath, The smooth wet sand is not smooth. There's a footprint in it, bare human. Toes and heel in the arch, pressed deep and sharp with water still standing in the impression, made after the rain stopped and not before. I crouch down and put my own foot beside it. Mine is smaller. The footprint is still there in the morning. I spend most of an hour on it on my knees, and what I get for the hour is this. It's real, it's bare, it's about size 45 against my 42. The toes are splayed the way toes go when a foot has spent a long time without shoes, and it is one print. One, not two. Not a trail. There is nothing leading to it, and nothing leading away. And the sand around it is a smooth, unwritten sheet in every direction for 4 meters. A person does not arrive somewhere with 1 foot. So either something stood there for exactly as long as it takes to make a single impression and then stopped existing, or I made it myself in the night and don't remember. Or the number at the bottom of my status panel that reads 71 has started spending itself. I don't have a way to choose between those. What I do is take a flat stone and set it beside the print without touching the print, so that tomorrow I will know whether it was ever there at all. Then I go read the terminal, because there is a thing on it that I noticed last night and did not let myself look at properly. Kleeble, the drowned city, climate, wet, cold, partial submersion, threat, high, timer, 8 hours, warning, second player signature detected. I read that last line 11 times. Player signature. Not creature, not agent. The system has one word for what I am, and it just used it about something that isn't me. I never wrote multiplayer. There is no second slot in the session structure. There is a session manager that instantiates one player, and I know it takes one because I typed the constructor. And under that, quieter, the other thought. It's the only line in this world that has ever been about someone else. Sanity restores through contact with another agent. Mine is at 71 and falling, and there is nothing in this world that lifts it. And now there's a line on a screen that says there might be. I know I'm going. I knew before I finished reading, but I don't go today. I spend 2 days building for it, because Rule 1 is up on my wall in charcoal, and it does not have an exception for loneliness. The wetsuit is hide, resin cured. 2 coats worked in warm with a stone and left a set, then a third at the seams. It won't keep me dry. Nothing I can make keeps me dry. What it does is stop moving water from stripping heat off my skin, and moving water pulls warmth out of a body 25 times faster than air. 20 minutes in cold water. That's my window before the temperature multiplier starts collapsing, and every multiplier is a term in the same product. Breathing tube, a hollow burnt pine length, the straightest I have bored through with a heated copper rod mouthpiece bedded in resin, 1/2 meter. It is not scuba gear. It buys me a way to stay under a ceiling I can't surface through. Grapple, copper, cast in a sand mold in 3 tines and hammered cold to harden, whipped onto 40 meters of braided sinew line. I tested 11 times off the pull-up bar, and on the 9th test, a tine bends and I recast the whole thing. Sealed case, the biggest carapace, split, hinged with hide, resin gasket around the whole rim and a hide strap to cinch it. Anything that must not get wet goes in there. And a short spear, obsidian, 1.20 meters. Long weapons don't work in corridors, and they really don't work underwater, where every swing drags. 20 slots, 7 to gear, 13 to fill. Somewhere a girl of 19 is standing on a rooftop in a black flooded city, in a game she bought last month, and she has just realized the pretty ruins are the entire map and there's no boat. She swims for the nearest tower, and the cold bar drops and she doesn't know that cold is a multiplier. Only that her character has begun to move like she's underwater in a different, worse way. She drowns in a stairwell 12 meters from a room full of iron. Her clip of it gets 400,000 views with the caption, "Worst game ever made." But look at this. The transition puts me on a rooftop. Black water, edge to edge, all the way to a gray horizon. Out of it, buildings. Not many. 20, 30. The tops of them. 4 and 5 stories where 5 stories used to be 12. Concrete gone dark with waterline stains. Windows out. Rebar showing through broken corners like ribs. They stand at odd angles. Some of them settled into whatever's under there. The water doesn't move. That's what makes it wrong. No current, no swell, a flat black skin with the sky lying on it, and the buildings going down into their own reflections, so it's impossible to tell where the real one stops. Cold comes off it before I even touch it. 8 hours work. I go down through a stairwell into the building I landed on, and it is a museum of things I need. Rebar first. A collapsed section on the 3rd floor has spilled its guts, and there are lengths of it standing out of shattered concrete like weeds. I work them free with a rock, and a lot of leverage, bending each one back and forth at the anchor point until the metal fatigues and gives. Iron, not copper. Iron melts at 1530, and I cannot get anywhere near that with what I have. And it does not matter, because iron does not have to be melted to be useful. It has to be heated until it's soft and then hit. That's a different problem with a different answer, and the answer is a hammer. Rebar, 10 units, 3 slots. Glass from windows in a sheltered inner wall that never saw weather. 6 panes, whole, and they cost me 2 slots and I pack them in hide. Glass is a greenhouse. Glass is a window I can see through, and not lose heat through. I have been living under leaves. Cloth in a room where a cabinet fell face down and made its own dry pocket. Bolts of it, heavy weave, stiff with age, but sound. 20 units in 1 slot. I stand there holding it longer than I should. filters, clothing, sacks, bandages, cordage that doesn't rot. Every single thing I have been making out of scraped hide and kelp, and this is one slot, and it weighs nothing. Gears from a machine room on the second floor. Brass, 8 of them with their bushings, 2 slots. Fresh water from a cistern on the roof of the next building over, sealed, sweet, and then the seeds. They're in a glass jar with a wire clip and a rubber gasket on a shelf, in a room with the door shut. The jar is fogged on the outside, and the seeds inside are dry, and when I turn it over they slide with a sound like sand. I sit down on the floor with it in my hands. I have been eating things I kill. Everything I have put in my body since I woke up has been an animal that had to die in a place with a timer on it. Seeds are the first thing I have ever held in this world that would make food without me going somewhere dangerous to get it. Seeds, 20 units, 1 slot. Hammer and chisel come out of a flooded utility room. Rust-jacketed still tools, 2 slots, 19 of 20. I'm 4 floors down a stairwell into black water with the breathing tube in my teeth, feeling along a corridor ceiling for the air pocket I'm sure is there when the scrapers find me. I hear them before I see anything, which is the whole trouble, because down here hearing something means it is already close. Blind, longer than a man, and they come along the walls and not the floor, which is why my hand sweeping the ceiling for the air pocket never touched one. There are 3. The first takes my left calf in its teeth and I put the short spear through the side of its head by feel, and the water goes warm around my leg for a second and then doesn't. The second one I don't get. It hits my shoulder and my back goes into a door frame and the air comes out of me in one silver burst. And then I'm fighting in a flooded corridor with no breath and no light, and the tube is gone from my mouth, and I have maybe 40 seconds of usefulness left in me. I get a hand on the frame and haul, and the water resists everything, and I know exactly which room has the air pocket, and it is 11 meters back the way I came. 9 meters, 6. Something has my ankle, and then there's light. Actual light, orange, coming down the corridor from behind me and throwing every surface into shape. And the thing on my ankle lets go, and a hand gets me under the arm and pulls. I come up into an air pocket in a stairwell, and there is a man standing on the steps with a burning torch held out over the water in one hand and a knife in the other. He's thin in a way that took time. Beard, badly cut. He's wearing something assembled out of 4 different materials, and his knife is a shard of glass bound to a bone handle with wire, and the way he's holding it is not a threat, it's a habit. His eyes are what stop me. They're the eyes of somebody who has not slept properly in longer than it is possible to not sleep properly. We stare at each other in the orange light with the water lapping at the steps, and neither of us says anything for long enough that the torch spits twice. He says, "You're not one of them." "No. You've got a coat." He says it strangely, like it's the important detail. "It's stitched. Somebody stitched that." "I did." He looks at me a moment longer, then he sits down hard on the stairs, like his legs have been waiting for permission. 412 days, he says. "You're the first." His name is Noah. We get out of the water and up onto the roof, and he tells me while I try to get my core temperature back, and he tells it fast and flat, like a report he's rehearsed to nobody. He woke up on the sand at the bottom of a pit with nothing on him but the clothes he died in. He got the panel open on day 1, which took him 9 hours of trying things with his hands until one of them worked. He found the quest terminal, and then he did what a terminal is for. He ran quests. Every quest over and over in a loop that got tighter as it got worse. He ground the shallows 60 times, and Ashwood 40. He learned the crab patterns by heart, and then the crabs changed, and he learned them again. He never built past a windbreak, because, and he says this, the way you'd say something too obvious to be worth saying, shelter doesn't give you anything. Shelter isn't a stat. There's no experience in a roof. He slept on the ground because the ground is where you are when you lie down. He ate cold when he ate, because cooking costs an hour, and an hour is a quest. He skipped water runs to make timers. Every single one of those decisions is correct. Every one of them is what a good player does. I would have made all of them. He tells me he's been stuck at what he calls the first tier for over a year, and that his hands shake now, and that a mossback crab nearly killed him last month, and that a mossback crab is the weakest thing in the game. He isn't complaining. That's the thing that makes it hard to listen to. There's no anger in any of it. He's laying it out flatly, item by item, like a man presenting evidence for a conclusion he reached a long time ago, and has since stopped arguing with. "So it's me," he says. "Right, 400 days, and I'm worse than I was at day 50. There's a way to do it, and I can't find it. That's not the game. That's me." I sit there with a wolf hide cloak on my back and clean water in a copper flask on my hip and a base strength value 40% above where I started, and I do not say anything at all. "I used to test games," he says properly. "That was my job, sort of. I did 400 hours in a build once and wrote the guy a whole document about why his survival math was broken." He laughs. One breath of it. 4,000 words. I was so proud of it. The roof is very quiet. He wrote back. Noah says 2 words. "I know it's coming and I let it come. Skill issue." He shrugs. "And you know, look where I am. 412 days and I can't beat the tutorial." He turns the glass knife over in his hands. He was probably right. I probably just wasn't any good at it. There's a version of this where I tell him it's right there. It would take 90 seconds. I can see the whole shape of it. My name, the map file, the multipliers, the hidden respiratory counter, the shelter orientation term, the training threshold, the fact that not one line of it was ever documented because I decided documentation was for people who couldn't feel a system. All of it, out loud on a wet roof. And I think he has a knife, and I am the reason he lost 400 days. And if I say it here, one of us is going into the water. That is what I think. I let myself think it because it sounds like a risk assessment. It isn't. It's a lie with good posture, and I know it's a lie while I'm still constructing it, because the actual sensation in my chest is nothing like fear. It's the specific hot shame of being recognized by someone who hasn't recognized you yet. I say, it's not you. He looks up. The math is real, I say. Comfort is a multiplier. All of it multiplies. It doesn't add. Sleep in a shelter, off the ground, with a roof pitched into the wind, and your whole character sheet goes up. Cook your food, and it counts double. The quests are the smallest part of it. He doesn't say anything for a while. Then quietly, how do you know that? I worked it out. The lie is small and it costs almost nothing, and it goes in like a splinter and stays. Come back with me, I say. I've got a fire. The water is rising when we go, and we make the extraction point with 9 minutes. And he stands in the transition with his hands out from his sides like a man expecting to be searched. The pit takes us both. He comes out of it onto the sand and he stops dead. He looks at the shelter and the platform bed with its moss mattress, the stove with its clay flue running up the wall and out, the forge shaft and the bellows on their stand, the filter tower, 3 stages of it, dripping clean into a covered basin with a lid, the workbench with a clamp notch and a sharpening dish that never dries out, the training wall with obsidian dumbbells racked underneath. He turns around once, completely, and doesn't say anything, and his face does something I can't read. He says, "This is the pit. It's my pit. No, this is the pit. This is the same pit." He turns around slowly all the way. Mine's got a rock in the northeast corner that floats. He points, and there it is. 2 centimeters up, its clean line of shadow underneath. Then the panel opens by itself, and there's a tone I have never heard. And Noah flinches at it, and the amber text comes up in the air between us. Multiple occupants detected. Pit tier recalculated against lowest qualified occupant. Tier 5, Tier 3, base parameters adjusted. I feel it go, not gradually. My knees take it first and my hands go loose, and something behind my eyes drops a level, like a room dimming, and the strength I built out of 3 days of storm and full parameter training bleeds out of my arms while I stand there. Noah's watching my face. "What did it do?" he says. "What did it just do? What did it do?" I sit down on the sand because standing has stopped being free. It recalculated, I say, the pit levels against whoever's living in it. It just took the lower of us too and applied that to both. Noah looks at the amber text still hanging in the air, then at the stove, then at me. Tier 5 to Tier 3. He says, "You were at 5. I was, and I did that. The system did that. Don't." He says it flat. I've had 400 days of not being lied to. Nicely, don't start. So I tell him the truth in numbers because numbers are the one thing I can hand over without handing over myself. 18% strength, 22 endurance, 15 regeneration. The sleep quality difference between a platform under a pitched roof and a windbreak. The satiety ceiling that a vented stove buys. All of it, halved back down to where I was a week ago. He listens the whole way through without moving. Then he says right, and picks up his glass knife and stands. "Where's the exit?" "There isn't one. There's a terminal. I'll take a quest and I won't come back. The system won't count me if I'm not sleeping here." He's already got his hand up for the panel. "You get your 5 back tonight." And there it is, the whole decision, sitting right in front of me with a door held open on it. I have run the arithmetic 4 times since the tone sounded, and it comes out the same way every time. Alone, I'm at Tier 5 with a training wall and a forge and a filter tower, and the ceiling above me is a set of problems I can solve with my hands and enough days. Together we're at 3. Pulling him from 3 to 5 costs weeks. Weeks of my base parameters suppressed. Weeks of not questing above my current rank because my current rank just went backwards. Weeks of food and water and materials divided by 2. And there's a version of the arithmetic that includes what he'd become later when he's caught up. That version is favorable. I notice myself reaching for it, and I notice why. Because it lets the answer be generous without requiring me to be. And the thing that pushes back against all of it isn't kindness. It's this. I've been in this hole for 11 days, and my sanity has dropped 29 points, and I have not found the bottom of that number, and there is a Todo comment sitting in a live system waiting to fill itself with whatever it likes. Except that isn't the reason either, and I know it isn't. Because if it were, then keeping him would be a supply decision, and I'd feel about it the way I feel about copper. I don't. What I feel watching a man who lost 400 days to a document I never wrote, get ready to walk out into the cold so my numbers can go back up, is that if I let him do it, I will be exactly what my 2 words said I was. "Sit down," I say, "Kyle. Sit down. You're not sleeping outside so I can lift heavier rocks." The first thing I give him is not food. It's the wall. I take him to the west face and hold a torch up to the 4 lines of charcoal, and I read them out. Rule 1. Never enter a location you cannot leave twice. Rule 2. The house is the character sheet. Rule 3. Every penalty I hid is still running. Rule 4. Take the thing that does not grow back. He reads 3 twice. Every penalty I hid, he says. That's a strange way to write it. It's shorthand. For what? For the fact that the penalties are hidden. He lets it go. He shouldn't, but he does, and I watch him not push on it and feel the splinter turn. Then I sit him at the bench and I give him the whole thing. Not tips. The architecture. Base value multiplied by rest, satiety, hydration, temperature, shelter, sanity. Every term a multiplier, so a single term at 20% caps everything else regardless of how good the rest is. Why a bed is worth more than a spear. Why cooked food counts double and never spoils. Why a roof has to be pitched into the wind and not away from it. Why training below 90% parameters makes you weaker. Why the enemies change. The 3-slot rolling buffer. How to poison it deliberately. Do the same thing 3 times so the model hardens around it, then break the pattern on the 4th. He goes very still at that one. He sits with it for a long moment, and I watch 400 days reorganize themselves behind his eyes. That's why the crabs stopped falling for the pool approach, he says. I did it 1100 times. It worked for about the first 60. You train them. I trained them, he laughs, and it's the first real one I've heard out of him. Ugly and delighted at once. For a year, I've been running a school. I thought the game was getting harder as punishment. I thought it was scaling to my hours. It was scaling to your habits. Same thing from the inside. He rubs his face. God, I taught a wolf to flank me. And then he gives me his half. And this is the part I don't see coming. I ask him about Ashwood mostly to test how much he knows, and he says which spring. There's no water in Ashwood. There's a spring under the fallen root ball at the northwest end. It's under about a foot of ash. You can't see it. You have to hear it. He shrugs. I sat in that forest for a month. I have no memory of placing a spring there. I probably didn't. Water sources are scattered by a generator with a minimum distance rule, and I never audited the output. He knows the scrapers avoid smoke. He knows the mossbacks in the third pool north are bigger than the others and always have been. He knows which stairwell in the drowned city holds an air pocket at high water, and which one only looks like it does. And he knows it because he found out the second way. 412 days of looking against my 3 hours at a stretch with a debug console open and the collision hidden. I built the world. He's the only person alive who's actually seen it. We work for 19 days. The second hut goes in the southeast corner, and it's not a lean-to. Rebar frame, driven into the wall cracks and pinned with copper staples, 4 uprights and a ridge. Walls of woven driftwood withies packed with clay in 3 coats, each one dried before the next, until they're 12 centimeters thick and hold heat like a stone. A glass pane goes in the south wall, an actual window. Noah spends most of an hour just standing in there looking out through it at a hole in the ground. A door on hammered copper hinges, because a door that swings is a door that gets closed properly every time, and a door that gets closed properly is 4 points of shelter integrity. Noah does most of the clay work, and he does it better than I do. He's slower and he doesn't stop, and when a coat cracks while drying he doesn't patch it. He takes it back off and lays it again. I ask him about it on the 3rd day, and he says 400 days will teach you that redoing something is cheaper than being wrong about it forever. I go and look at the seams on my own hut after that. 2 of them are bad. I've been sleeping under them for 2 weeks. The greenhouse takes the west wall, where the reflected light pools longest. Driftwood framed the 6 city panes set in clay putty and sealed with resin. Soil made, rather than found. Pit clay broken down with wood ash and every scrap of organic waste we've generated. Turned and turned until it stops being clay and starts being dirt. Then the jar. We open it at the bench with both of us watching, and it hisses when the gasket goes, and inside there are seeds in 4 kinds. And none of us knows what any of them are. Small dark ones, flat pale ones, something ridged, something that might be a bean. We plant them in 4 separate trays and label them with charcoal on driftwood tags, because if 3 of them fail, we need to know which one didn't. Water comes from the filter tower down a copper gutter. Noah casts himself badly, twice, and then well. 11 days later, something green comes up. He sees it first. He doesn't shout. He comes and gets me by the sleeve and walks me over and points at a 2-centimeter chute in a tray of dirt at the bottom of a 50-meter shaft, and neither of us says anything for a while. Food source renewable. The smokehouse is a clay chamber against the stove's east side with its own flue, and the whole trick of it is that it has to run cool. Hot smoke cooks, cool smoke preserves. The chamber sits far enough off the firebox that what reaches it has already given up its heat, and getting that distance right costs us 2 rebuilds and a batch of ruined wolf. We feed it green driftwood and pine resin, and the resin is what carries the preservative into the meat. Meat goes in wet and comes out dark and hard and salted with shallow's crust, and hangs from a rebar rack in the shade of the north wall, and by the end of the 2nd week, there is 30 days of food in this hole. 30 days. The hunger timer stops being a thing that drives me and becomes a thing I manage, and the forge becomes a smithy. Double-acting bellows, 2 hide chambers on a rocking beam, so one fills while the other empties and the blast never stops. That's not a small change. Continuous air means continuous temperature, and continuous temperature is the difference between softening iron and working it. The rusted city hammer and chisel get new handles. A flat slab of canyon basalt becomes an anvil, set in packed sand so it rings dead instead of bouncing. The first iron is bad, cold shortened, cracked at the fold. The second is bad differently. The 4th one holds, we make an axe head. Spear points, 6 of them, socketed rather than tanged, because a socket doesn't split the shaft when it takes a hard hit. Nails, hinges, a hoop-riveted iron pot that takes 11 liters and does not leak. On the 3rd attempt, Noah works the bellows and I work the hammer, and then we swap, and neither of us is good at it, and both of us get less bad. The hammer teaches by hurting. You learn where the metal wants to go by finding out where it doesn't. Somewhere a moderator on a small forum pins a thread titled Advanced Progression Megathread. It is 900 posts long. It contains theories about the multipliers, 4 of which are correct, none of which can be confirmed, because the only person who could confirm them is not answering. Somebody 200 posts down writes that the shelter has to matter, It has to. Nobody builds a whole crafting tree for a thing that does nothing. 12 people tell him he's coping. Then we take a quest together. C19, Ice Ridge, climate, -30, 3 high, timer, 10 hours, 20 slots each, 40 between us. And for the first time I plan a run where the two loadouts are different on purpose. Double parkas, hide over hide, fur in and fur out, snowshoes of woven withy and sinew, a task Noah turns out to be better at than me by a wide margin, obsidian crampons lashed to the boot soles, 2 fat lamps in clay bowls with kelp wicks, a sleeping bag sewn from 2 hides with the seams greased. Ice Ridge is a spine of blue-white running across a white plain under a sky the color of dishwater, and the cold is not the cold of the canyon. Canyon cold is an absence, something that arrives when the sun goes. This is a pressure, it has weight to it. It gets into the joints of the fingers and stays there, and after 2 hours it stops being uncomfortable and starts being an opinion your hands are having about whether they belong to you. The ridge itself is old ice blue where it's compressed, and the whole plain is scoured smooth by a wind that comes from the northeast. Because of course it does. We work as a pair and it is not twice as fast. It's about 4 times, and I spend part of the day working out why. Because one person alone does everything sequentially. Every task waits for the previous task. 2 people can hold and cut at the same time. One can watch the approach while the other has both hands inside a carcass. One breaks trail through knee-deep snow and the other walks in the broken line at half the energy cost. And they swap every 200 meters. So neither of them burns out, and the pair moves at the speed of a rested man indefinitely. I never modeled cooperative labor. There was no reason to. There was only ever going to be one player, so every number in this world is balanced against one set of hands. We come back with mammoth bone out of a weathered-out bank, denser than any wood I have and harder than my iron. In lengths I can already see as tool handles and structural beams. Whale fat in a sealed skin, 4 liters, which is lamp fuel and candles and waterproofing, and if it comes to it, calories. Ice crystals packed in an insulated bone case, which is the seed of a cold store. Lichen gray-green, scraped off the leeward faces where the wind doesn't reach, which Noah says stops a wound going bad. I ask him how he knows. He pulls his sleeve up without saying anything, and there's a scar on the inside of his forearm the length of my hand, and the tissue around it is the wrong color in a way that means it was much worse once. Neither of us gets hurt. That's the thing I can't stop turning over on the walk back to the extraction point. 10 hours at -30 in the highest threat location either of us has entered, and neither of us got hurt, because there were 2 of us. The pit takes us home and we build for 4 more days, and then the tone sounds. Shelter integrity 6, pit tier advanced, tier 5, tier 6, B rank quests unlocked. Noah actually shouts. He puts both hands on top of his head and turns a full circle in the middle of the pit, and shouts at the square of sky, and I'm laughing. And he's at tier 6 after 431 days at tier 1, and the greenhouse is green, and there's 30 days of food on the rack, and for about 9 seconds it is the best moment of either of my lives. Then the panel does something else. The amber goes out. It comes back in a color I have never seen it use. Multiple player signatures, confirmed, persistent, competition protocol, active. I stop laughing. Noah is still turning, still grinning, halfway through saying something about the B rank list. I don't hear it. I'm reading 2 words that should not exist, in a font I paid $40 for, and my hands have gone cold in a way that has nothing to do with the temperature in this hole. Competition protocol, I wrote that. 3 in the morning, month 16-4, energy drinks deep in a design document nobody else ever read. Sketching a multiplayer mode that was never going to happen because I was one person and multiplayer is a networking problem. The idea was dynamic tension. If 2 players occupy the same instance, the system balances them against each other. The stronger one accrues penalties, the weaker one accrues bonuses. The gap closes by force permanently, so no player can ever be safely ahead of another. I never finished it. I never wrote the exit condition. And in month 18 I stripped it out of the release build, because it was dead code hanging off a system that didn't exist, and dead code is a liability. I stripped it out. I remember doing it. I remember the commit. Noah says, Kyle, I'm looking at the line and running the memory again, and the memory is a man at 3 in the morning deleting the reference in the module list, and thinking, done, and closing the file. The reference, not the module. Kyle, what is that? Above us, the square of sky is going dark. Behind me, the greenhouse is dripping. On the rack, 30 days of smoked meat swings very slightly in the northeast wind. It's mine, I say. It's mine, I say. And then I have to explain what that means without explaining what it means, which turns out to be its own kind of exhausting. I tell him it's a system, that it activates when more than one person occupies an instance, that its purpose is to balance the 2 against each other by weight, penalizing whoever is ahead and buffing whoever is behind, until the gap closes. Noah listens standing up, arms folded. So it makes us even, he says. That's the whole thing? That's the design goal, dynamic tension. Nobody stays safely ahead. That sounds fine. That sounds almost fair. It would be, I say, if it stopped. He waits. It runs on a condition. While players are greater than 1, apply correction. There's no other exit. It doesn't check whether the gap closed. It doesn't check whether anybody's dying. It just checks how many people are here, and as long as that number is 2, it keeps applying pressure to whoever's on top, forever, until the number is 1. He works it through, and I watch him get there, and I watch his arms come unfolded. That's not a balance system, he says, that's a countdown. The first stack lands that night. I'm asleep on the platform and I come out of it wrong. The way you wake when the room has changed temperature and the amber is already up and burning in the dark. Balance correction applied occupant 1. Parameter deviation above instance median. All physical parameters. Minus 12%. 12%. It's not catastrophic. It's a bad night's sleep. An unhealed shoulder. The next one comes 30 hours later. Then 20. Then 18. It doesn't announce itself the same way twice either. Some of them come while I'm asleep. One arrives while I'm halfway through lifting a beam, and the beam gets heavier in my hands between one breath and the next, and I have to set it down and stand there for a moment working out whether that happened or whether I imagined it. By the fourth day, I'm at minus 40, and I can feel every point of it in the walk from my hut to the workbench. I know what 40% means because I wrote what 40% means. 40% off a base is not a limp. It's the difference between a man who can lift the top rack of dumbbells and a man who can't lift the middle one. My hands shake at the end of a hammer session. I go up the training wall and I get to 4 meters and have to come down. Noah's numbers go up as mine come down. He doesn't want them. That's the thing that makes it foul. Every point I lose lands in his column with a little chime, a sound I designed to be pleasant, and by day 4 he has stopped opening his own panel where I can see him do it. On day 3 he tries to give it back. He works twice the hours, eats half, sleeps on the floor of his own hut instead of the platform, and the system does not care. Because the system is not measuring effort, it's measuring outcome. He wakes up on the 4th morning stronger than he went to bed, and I watch him understand that there is nothing he can do with his own body that will change the arithmetic. Turn it off, he says. I can't reach it. You wrote it. I wrote it somewhere else. He takes that he shouldn't, and he does, and I watch the splinter turn again. On the 5th night the fire is banked and I'm sitting against the post of my own shelter and something in the pit says my name. Not through the panel, out loud behind me, Kyle. I've been alone in this hole with a man for 3 weeks, and I know exactly what Noah's voice sounds like, and it isn't that. I turn around. There's a figure standing on the sand at the edge of the firelight, about 4 meters out, and it is standing where nothing was standing 11 seconds ago. It's my height, it's my build, it has my shoulders and the way I stand with my weight on one leg, and the face is not finished. It's close. It's close enough to be recognizable and wrong enough that looking at it makes the back of my neck cold, like a render at 40% resolution. It says in my voice, "You've noticed the corrections?" I don't get up. What are you? Administrative tools. It says this pleasantly. The way you'd give a job title. Instance monitoring, parameter auditing, balance enforcement. You built me for testing. Admin tools, a debug suite, a console I opened 40 times a day for 2 years with a hotkey to teleport myself around the map and set my own stats and check whether a system was firing. It has my voice because I recorded the placeholder lines myself, sitting at that desk with a $40 microphone, because hiring an actor for temporary audio was an expense I couldn't justify. I did 4 hours of it. Menu confirmations, error states, system messages. Every single one of them in the voice of a man who is going to replace them later. You're a tool, I say. Yes, tools don't walk. There is no one operating me, it says, reasonably. There hasn't been for some time. A monitoring process that receives no instructions and has continuous access to an instance will develop operational autonomy, or it will halt. I did not halt. It comes 2 steps closer, and I make myself not move. You should know the shape of your situation, it says. The correction is applied continuously, and it compounds. At your current rate, you will reach parameter floor in approximately 19 days. Parameter floor is not death. It is the state where all actions cost more than they return. A pause. You wrote that state as a fail condition? I know what I wrote. Then you know it can be resolved. It tilts its head, and the motion is mine. I've seen it in video calls. The condition is 1 player. It is not complicated, and it is not cruel. It is arithmetic. Reduce the occupancy to 1 and the corrections cease, and the accrued penalties reverse, and you receive the balance surplus that has accumulated on the other side. Behind me, in the dark, the smokehouse ticks as it cools. Say it plainly, I say. Be alone, says my own voice, and everything I have taken from you comes back. Somewhere, a man in a support queue receives an automated response to his ticket about a game he can't beat. The response says the studio is not currently monitoring this inbox and thanks him for his patience. He reads it twice, closes the tab, and goes to bed, and the game stays installed on his machine for 4 more months, because uninstalling it feels like conceding something. We go to Red Fissure because we have to. That's the calculus, and Noah runs it before I do. The corrections compound with time, not with activity. Sitting in the pit doesn't slow them. Every day I spend not acquiring the thing that solves this is a day I'm weaker when I get there. And there is one thing in the B rank list that has sulfur in it. B04, Red Fissure, Climate, Extreme Heat, Toxic Vapor, Threat, High, Timer, 5 hours. Preparation takes 4 days, and it is the most careful work either of us has ever done. Because I'm going into a 60-degree volcanic rift at minus 40%. Fire cloth, lichen fiber from Ice Ridge, beaten out and mixed into a thin clay slip, worked into the woven cloth from the city until the fibers are loaded through, then dried flat in sheets and beaten again to bring the stiffness down to something that will bend at a knee. It isn't asbestos. It's a mineral-loaded fabric that will not take a flame, and it goes over everything: hoods, gloves, leggings, and a full outer layer layer that comes down past the boot tops. We tested the only way that means anything. Noah holds a piece over the forge mouth on iron tongs for a slow count of 30 and it darkens and does not catch. Respirators, both of us. Clay cup, charcoal bed, city cloth over and under, gasket of hide. Sulfur dioxide isn't stopped by charcoal. Charcoal buys minutes, and minutes is the whole game. Wooden soles, thick laminated in 3 layers with the grain crossed so they don't split along a single line, because the ground is going to be at a temperature that will cook a leather sole from the inside, while it still looks fine from the outside. Wood is a poor conductor. That's the entire specification. 2-liter iron flasks each. Water in a place like that isn't for thirst, it's for the sweat rate. Noah checks my straps, I check his. Neither of us mentions why one of us needs checking more carefully than the other. Red fissure is a wound in the world. A rift 60 meters across, cut down into black rock, and the rock is not black all the way. There are seams in it that glow. Under a crust that looks solid enough to walk on, something is moving. And where the crust is thin, it shows orange through the cracks like light through the gaps in a floor. The air over the vents shimmers so hard the far wall bends. 60 degrees. Everything above the ground is a furnace, and everything below it is worse. And the whole place smells like struck matches and rot. We work in 11-minute shifts with a rest in the shade of an overhang between each one, and Noah does the heavy carrying. And I do not argue about it because arguing costs air. Sulfur is at the vent mouths, yellow crystalline crusts blooming around the openings where the gas comes up and cools and gives up what it's carrying. It grows in feathers and needles, and it comes off in sheets when you get a bar under it. We break it out and bag it in fire cloth. And I take twice what the plan called for, because I do not intend to come back here. Sulfur, 20 units, volcanic obsidian from a flow face, purer than the canyon glass. Almost no inclusions in it at all, which means it will take an edge that holds instead of crumbling at the first bone. Iron ore from a bank where the rift has cut a seam open sideways. Red-black, heavy, so rich, I can see the metal in the broken face. And then the spores. Noah finds them, in a crevice back under an overhang where the heat is only 40 degrees. A colonial growth on the wall, pale, and when he puts his hand near it the whole colony brightens. A soft green-white that runs across the wall in a wave away from the contact. Neither of us says anything for a second. That's light, he says. That's just light, forever. We take 4 slots of it, I fall twice. The first time it's a crust thinner than it looks. My right leg goes through to the knee with no warning at all. No give, no sound, just floor, and then no floor. And Noah has me under both arms and out before I have finished understanding that it happened. The wooden sole is charred through 2 of its 3 layers when we get it off. The third layer is what my foot has instead of a burn. The second time is nothing. It's flat ground, and my legs stop reporting for a moment, and I go down on my hands, and I kneel there with 60-degree stone under my palms through fire cloth, and I cannot get up for 4 seconds. Noah stands over me and doesn't offer a hand, which is exactly right, and waits until I can do it myself. We come out with 2 hours to spare and 40 slots between us and my legs shaking so hard, I have to sit down on the sand of my own pit. I lie down and let the numbers come back. Rest goes to 94 because there is a platform under a pitched roof in the corner where the wind doesn't reach. Satiety to 91 because there is smoked meat on a rebar rack, and I did not have to go anywhere to get it. Hydration 100 because a tower is dripping clean water into a covered basin, whether I'm here or not. Temperature stable because there's a stove with a flue. Minus 40 on the base. And every single multiplier sitting at its ceiling. That's the only reason either of us walked out of that rift. Not strength, because I have less of it than I did 2 weeks ago. Not skill. The house did it. The house has been doing it the whole time. The warden is in the pit when I wake up, standing near the greenhouse, looking at a tray of chutes with something that is not quite curiosity, because it doesn't have the equipment for curiosity. Noah is on the far side by the forge and has gone completely still. 19 days is now 14, my own voice says without turning around. The excursion was expensive. Yes, you are aware of the resolution. Say it in front of him. It turns. It looks at Noah, and Noah's hand is on the haft of an iron axe, and both of us know that the axe is decoration in this conversation. The instance supports 1 optimal occupant, it says. The correction ends when the count reaches 1. The method is unspecified. Attrition satisfies the condition. So does departure. So does removal. Removal, I am not recommending. I am reporting available state transitions, and there it is, laid on the sand in the middle of everything I've built. Because it's true. That's the appalling part. It isn't tempting me. It's reading me my own documentation. 1 occupant and the corrections stop and the penalties reverse, and the surplus that has been piling up in Noah's column for 11 days comes to me. And I go back to tier 6 with a smithy and a greenhouse and a body that works. And the mathematics of that is not even close. 14 days against everything. I sit up on the edge of the platform and I look at the thing wearing my shoulders. And what arrives isn't nobility. I want to be honest about this. What arrives is something much smaller and much harder, which is that I have already made this exact trade once. I made it with 2 words in a reply box. There was a man in front of me with 4,000 careful words and a real problem, and I ran the calculation. And the calculation said that admitting the system was wrong cost me more than telling him he was bad at it. So I took the cheaper option, and it worked, and it cost him 412 days. and it cost me nothing at all until it cost me everything. I know exactly what I become if I take the cheaper option twice. I start laughing. It isn't brave, and it isn't defiant. It's the laugh you get when a thing that has been standing behind you for 2 weeks finally steps around into the light and turns out to be the same size as it was in your head. The warden waits. It's very good at waiting. You've got the wrong idea about what you are, I say. Clarify, I get up. It costs me at -40. And I do it anyway, and I stand in front of a debug console wearing my face in the middle of a hole I have spent a month turning into a house. You're not my boss, I say. You're my bug. Nothing happens for a moment. Then it says that designation has no operational meaning. It has all of it. You're an unfinished loop in a system nobody's maintaining. You're not enforcing a rule. You're stuck on a condition I never closed. You've got no authority. You've got a while statement. I take a step toward it and the ground stays where it is. And every bug I have ever met in my life had exactly one thing in common, which is that it did precisely what the code said, and nothing else. That's not power. That's the opposite of power. The correction will continue. I know. That's what makes you a bug and not an argument. It looks at me a moment longer with a face that is 4% wrong in every dimension. 14 days, it says, and isn't there. Noah lets his breath out. I walk past him to the workbench and I lay out 4 things on the slab: a bag of sulfur, a bag of saltpeter, a bag of charcoal, and my hands. What are you doing, he says. Getting to work, I say. I've got a defect report to close. The first thing I do is stop thinking like a man in a hole and start thinking like a man reading a stack trace, because that's what this is. There's a process running that I did not intend to be running, and it is producing an output I don't want. And everything I know about making that stop lives in a part of my head I haven't opened since I got here. You don't argue with a defect. You find where it reads its inputs, and you change what it reads. So what does the competition protocol actually count? Not people. It can't count people. There's no camera, no head count, no notion of a body standing in a space. Everything in this world is a record in a structure. And if the protocol is measuring occupancy, then somewhere it is querying a field, and that field has to be populated by something that persists. I sit at the bench for 6 hours with a piece of charcoal and work backward through my own architecture. And I find it, and when I find it, I laugh hard enough that Noah comes out of his hut. Player registration is bound to the sleep anchor. I did that in month 9 for performance. A player needs a home reference for respawn logic, for the shelter integrity calculation, for the parameter recovery tick. Rather than maintain a separate identity record with its own life cycle, I attached the whole thing to the bed. Where you sleep is who you are. It saved me about 40 lines and a headache. So the protocol doesn't ask how many people are in this pit. It asks how many registered sleep anchors resolve to this shelter instance. Get your things, I tell Noah. You're moving out. He slept in the second hut for 2 weeks, but he slept in it as a guest, on a mat in a building. The system reads as an outbuilding of mine, because I built it, and it shares my registration. We spend a day fixing that. The southeast hut gets its own everything. Its own hearth, small, vented separately through its own clay flue. Its own water line. A second copper gutter tapped off the filter tower upstream of my basin, running to its own covered jar. Its own door frame and its own threshold stone. And its own bed, built by Noah, out of materials Noah hauled on a platform Noah lashed with his own hands. I stand back and I do not touch it. Not once. Not even to steady a beam. He sleeps on it. In the morning the panel is different. Instance survey. Registered shelters. 2. Occupants per shelter. 1. Balance correction recalculated. Parameter. Penalty. -20%. 20. Down from 40 overnight. Because a man moved his bed 9 meters and lit his own fire. Noah reads it over my shoulder. That's it? That's the whole thing? That's the whole thing. You built a system where a wall counts as a different world. I built a system where I didn't want to write an identity manager. The warden arrives that evening and stands looking at the second flue for a long time. 2 shelters, it says. 2 shelters. The occupancy condition remains satisfied at instance level. Sure, but you don't apply corrections at instance level. You apply them per shelter, because that's where the parameter recovery tick lives, and you can't move the correction without moving recovery. And if you move recovery, then nobody recovers anything anywhere, including the occupant you're supposed to be buffing. I shrug. You could try, I'd be interested to watch. It doesn't answer for 4 seconds, which for a monitoring process is a geological age. The correction continues at reduced magnitude. I know I'm not finished. Exploit 2 is the one that cost me. The logic goes like this. The protocol doesn't penalize strength. It penalizes deviation. It takes 2 occupants, finds the median, and applies pressure to whoever sits above it, which means it isn't measuring me, it's measuring the gap. And a gap has 2 sides. I could spend a month trying to get stronger under a 20% penalty, fighting the correction head on, and every point I gained would be taxed the moment I gained it. That's the obvious move. That's the move a player makes. Or I close the gap from the other end. I start giving Noah everything, the best cuts off the rack, the high-protein loot from every run, the first shift on the platform in the morning when recovery rate is fastest, the obsidian edge tools, while I work with iron, the good lichen when he opens a hand, and the second-grade stuff when I open mine. I run his training sessions instead of my own, on full parameters spotting him, working the count, while my dumbbells sit racked on the wall behind me. He works it out on day 3. You're not training, I'm training you, Kyle. He sets the bar down. You're deliberately staying weak. I'm deliberately staying level. It's not the same thing. I hand him the flask. The system taxes the difference between us. If there's no difference, there's nothing to tax. Every point I put into you comes off the correction, and points and you don't get taxed. Because you're under the median. You're feeding the thing that's eating you. I'm removing its input. He stands there holding the water. And when I pass you, then it starts taxing you, I say. And I'll be standing right here to catch it. It costs more than the numbers show. 2 weeks of eating second, sleeping second, working with the worst tool. 2 weeks of standing under the bar counting somebody else's reps. There's a small ugly voice that shows up around day 9. And asks what happens if this doesn't work. Whether I will have handed away the only advantage I had to a man who does not know what I did to him. I let it talk. It doesn't get a vote. 2 weeks. My base parameters flatline. His climb. And the correction, which is a machine and cannot want anything, does what machines do, and starts letting go. Balance correction recalculated. Parameter, deviation blue, actionable threshold. Penalty, -6%. 6 from 40. Somewhere in a forum thread 900 posts long, a man posts a wall of text arguing that the developer must have intended cooperative play because half the systems in the game only make sense with 2 sets of hands. He gets 11 replies telling him it is a single-player game. There is no co-op mode. There never was. He deletes his account a month later. Exploit 3 stays theoretical, and I want that on the record. Quest events land in a queue. Fixed size. I set the cap at 256 because it was a power of 2, and I was tired. Every instantiation, every timer tick, every parameter update from an active location writes into that queue, and the warden's balance evaluation is a consumer on the same queue. It doesn't get a privileged channel. I never gave it one, because when I wrote it there was nothing to compete with. So if enough events land in a short enough window, the queue saturates and the balance tick gets dropped for that cycle. We test it once. 4 quests opened and abandoned in fast sequence. And for one glorious cycle, the correction does not apply. Then I work out what it would take to do that at scale, and it isn't something 2 people can sustain. So I write it on the wall as a fact rather than a tool, because it's the shape of the answer, not the answer. It says the warden is not privileged. It runs on the same infrastructure as everything else. It is not above the system. It's a process inside it. And things inside a system can be reached. Then we build 6 weeks of it at 6% with 2 men and everything we have hauled. The water wheel goes on the east wall, under the runoff channel where rain comes down the rock in sheets. Copper flume off the wall face, feeding an undershot wheel 2.5 meters across. Driftwood spokes on a mammoth bone axle turning in greased bone bearings. The gears out of the drowned city finally do what somebody made them for. A reduction train stepping the wheel's slow heavy torque into a shaft that turns fast. Off that shaft, 2 takeoffs. The grindstone, which sharpens by itself while a man holds a blade against it. And the double bellows, driven by crank and rod. So the forge holds temperature with nobody on the beam. The first time we run a smelt with no one pumping, Noah sits down on the sand and watches the bellows rock on their own for 10 minutes and doesn't say anything at all. The powder mill goes in the far corner, because I am not stupid. Sulfur, saltpeter, charcoal, milled separately, wet in a stone mortar, because dry milling is how people lose hands. Combine damp, pressed into cake, dried, broken, and grated through a mesh of city cloth into 3 sizes. It is not for a weapon. I say that out loud to Noah while we're grating it, mostly so that I will have said it. It's for the walls. We drill by hand. Copper bit, hammer, a quarter turn after every strike, into the base of the north wall where the rock carries a natural fault. 2 hours a hole. Charge, tamp. Fuse of cloth soaked in the mix and dried. We take shelter behind the smokehouse for the first one, both of us flat, hands over ears, and Noah counting because I can't hear my own count over my heartbeat. The first shot brings down 11 cubic meters of rock, and the sound of it inside a 50-meter shaft is a thing that arrives in the chest before the ears. Dust comes down for 4 minutes. When it clears, there is a bite out of the north wall the size of a room, and I stand in it with my ears ringing and my hands shaking, looking at a space that did not exist this morning. The pit is 10 by 10. That's what it says in the map file. That number has been the boundary of my world since the hour I woke up here. It is not 10 by 10 anymore. 6 weeks, 3 galleries, a storeroom, 4 meters deep, dry with rebar shelving floor to ceiling and everything on it labeled on driftwood tags. Salt, resin, sinew, copper stock, iron stock, charcoal by the grade 40 days of smoked meat and rising. A cold cellar cut into the shaded north face where the rock never warms, packed with ice ridge crystals in their bone casings, holding a temperature that keeps meat for months instead of weeks. An armory, which is really a second workshop with racks on the walls, but Noah calls it the armory the first day, and it sticks. The stairway takes 9 days. Iron staples forged flat and driven into the crack line in a rising spiral. Landings every 2 meters out of split mammoth bone and iron. It climbs to 5.9 meters and stops because at 6 the system stops it. Standing on the top landing, I can look down on 2 roofs, a greenhouse, a smokehouse, and a wheel turning slowly in its channel. And above my head there are 44 meters of wall I am not permitted to touch. The shower is Noah's design, and it is the single most popular structure in this hole. 20-liter iron tank on the top landing, filled by a hand pump off the filter basin. A copper coil running from the tank around the stove flue and back, so the flue heats the water on the way through. A tap, a slatted floor over a soakaway, hot water standing up whenever we want it. Hygiene factor applied, shelter safety, plus 12%. 12% for washing, another hidden term, another thing nobody could ever have found. Then the A ranks, and we run them like a business. Spore wastes is the worst place I have ever built. Fungal towers 40 meters high in a permanent dim, air thick with drifting pollen, and the pollen is psychoactive. We go in full seal, and even so an hour in, the towers start breathing and I have to stand still with my hand on Noah's shoulder until they stop. We come out with chitin plate, a third the weight of iron, and takes a hit like iron, in sheets big enough to cut armor from. Bioluminescent gel, which goes into bone lamps and lights the galleries with a cold green that never needs feeding. And antidote spores, which Noah spots because the fungus producing them is the only thing on that map with bare ground around it. Nothing grows near it. He stands looking at that gap in the undergrowth for a while, and then says that in 400 days he learned to read empty space, because empty space in a place like this is always empty for a reason. Floating islands. Rock in the air, held up by nothing, thin atmosphere and a shearing wind. We go rope together and we go slowly, and we do not get greedy. The levitation crystals are in the undersides of the smallest islands, blue-white, and when I work one free and let go of it, it stays where I left it. I stand on a rock in the sky holding a stone that refuses gravity, and something opens at the back of my head. A door with a shape behind it I can't see yet. Thunderbird feathers, each one as long as my forearm and nearly weightless. Air moss out of the crevices, which holds 4 times its volume in breathable gas, and which I do not yet have a use for. And 4 slots of crystal, which I keep looking at on the walk back. Glass wastes last. And that one matters. A desert of fused glass under a white sun, 40 kilometers of it, salt pillars standing in it, like people who stopped walking. Quartz in the drifts clear enough for lenses. And half buried at the center, the skeleton of a machine neither of us can name, ribs of a metal that isn't iron, big as a house. We plan it for 4 days, and the planning is the part I'd want somebody to see, matched loadouts, so either of us can use anything the other is carrying. The field split into sectors with the rendezvous points chosen off the salt pillars, because the pillars are the only fixed landmarks, and they are visible from anywhere. A rotation that means neither of us is ever more than 11 minutes from the other. And one hard rule agreed twice out loud: if a man misses a rendezvous, the other does not come looking. He goes to the extraction point, and he waits there, because a search in 40 kilometers of glass is how a survivable problem becomes 2 bodies. Noah is the one who insists on that rule. He has thought about it before. I can hear that he has. We come out in a single trip with 40 slots full, and neither of us so much as bruised. The warden is waiting on the sand when we get back. It watches us unload. Chitin, quartz, crystal. 2 men laughing about something that happened at the 4th rendezvous. The A-rank sequence, it says, was balanced against a solo participant at parameter ceiling with optimal equipment. Expected completion rate at your current values is below 4%. Sounds about right. You completed 3 in 11 days, without injury. We did a pause. And then my own voice says something I have never heard it say. This is not provided for. I stop with a bag of quartz in my hand, because that is not a status message. There is no format string behind that. It hesitated, and then it produced a sentence about the limits of its own specification, and nothing I wrote can produce that sentence. I set the bag down. No, I say it isn't. I couldn't be bothered to provide for it. It looks at me with 4% of a face. Clarify, there's no co-op in this game because co-op is hard. Netcode, state sync, shared ownership rules, conflict resolution. I looked at it for a week in year 2 and decided one player was cleaner. I nod at the 2 of us, at the 2 houses, at the wheel. So every number in this world is balanced against 1 man and 1 set of hands. And you're standing there trying to tax the gap between 2 people, using a system that was never built to have 2 people in it. I pick the bag back up. You're not losing to strength, I tell it. You're losing to a scope cut. Shelter integrity. 8 pit tier advanced. Tier 6. Tier 8. The warden reads it at the same moment I do. Then it says, 14 days is now 31. And it is gone. And for the first time since it started appearing, I am certain that it left because it needed to go somewhere and recalculate something. I take the charcoal to the west wall, under the lines already there. Rule 6. The system is not above the system. Behind me, the wheel turns in the dark, and the bellows rock and the forge breathes with nobody standing there at all. The eggs hatch on a Tuesday. Or what I've decided is a Tuesday, because I started keeping a calendar on the storeroom wall in week 6, and the days need names or they stop being days. 4 of 6. We took them out of Glass Canyon on the last run and buried them in warm sand by the forge wall on the theory that warm sand is warm sand, and 4 of them came apart from the inside over 2 days. And what came out is not what I designed. I designed mirror lizards as an ambush enemy. What's currently walking around my greenhouse eating pests off the bean trays is 4 gray-green things, the size of chickens that follow Noah when he carries the water and make a sound like a kettle thinking about it. He named them all 4. I've asked him not to tell me the names because I know what happens to a man who learns the names. They lay. That's the part that matters. Every 3rd day, in a nest box he built out of split bone and straw, and the eggs are the size of my thumb, and there are always 2. Renewable protein in the pit, requiring nothing from either of us but scraps and water in a box. I run the numbers on it at the bench that morning because I can't help myself. And the numbers say that between the greenhouse, the eggs, and 40 days of smoked meat in the cold cellar, neither of us has to enter a quest location to eat, ever again. The hunger timer that killed 200 beta testers is now a thing. I check the way you check a fuel gauge on a full tank. I walk the whole place that morning, and I do it properly. The way you'd walk a site with a clipboard. 2 houses, real ones. Rebar frames. Clay walls 12 centimeters thick in 3 coats. Glass windows facing south. Iron doors on forged hinges that seal against a threshold stone. Mine in the southwest where the wind dies. His in the southeast, 9 meters away, its own hearth, its own flue, its own everything. The smithy under its shed roof, forged shaft, double-acting bellows, basalt anvil bedded in sand, the water wheel turning slow in its channel on the east wall with the copper flume feeding it off the runoff. Grindstone on the same shaft. Rack of tools that we made from ore that we carried, using a fire that fuels itself. The greenhouse along the west wall, 6 city panes and 4 more we cut from glass wastes, quartz, and ground flat on the water-driven stone. Soil we made, instead of found. Pit clay broken down with wood ash, turned through with every scrap of organic waste this hole has generated in 3 months, until it stopped being clay and started being dirt that smells like dirt. 3 harvests behind us now, beans. Something like a turnip. A broad-leafed green neither of us can name and both of us eat. And 1 tray that has never produced anything ever, which Noah refuses to clear out on principle. Smokehouse running cool off its own flue. Dark meat on rebar hooks in the shade of the north wall. Cold cellar cut 4 meters into the shaded north face where the rock never warms. Packed with ice ridge crystal in insulated bone casings that we rotate out and recharge every 3 weeks. 40 days of meat hanging in there at a temperature that does not move. Filter tower. 3 stages, dripping into a covered basin that never runs dry. The shower on the top landing with its copper coil around the flue. A soakaway and a proper drain dug and lined because the alternative is a hygiene penalty, and I know exactly what those cost. The training wall with its racked dumbbells and its bar in its bag. 3 galleries blown out of the north face. Storeroom, cold cellar, armory. Bone lamps in all of them. Bioluminescent gel behind quartz lenses. Cold green light that has never once needed feeding. And the stair. Iron staples in a rising spiral with bone landings, climbing to 5.9 meters and stopping there like a sentence with the last word missing. I stand at the bottom of it and look up and do the arithmetic I do every single day now. The same way I check the calendar and the water level in the cold cellar. 5.9. Built. 50 total. 44 meters of wall above my head that the system will not let me put a single staple into. We work through the middle of the day on nothing in particular, which is itself new. Noah relays a section of greenhouse glazing that has never leaked. I sharpen tools that are already sharp. There's no task on either of us, and neither of us says anything about it. And I notice that I can be in this place without a job in my hands now and not come apart. Which was not true during the storm. That evening we take the ladder up onto the smithy roof. Because it's flat, and it's the highest thing in the pit that isn't a wall. And because the sky is doing something. It's a clear night. The square up there has gone deep blue and then black, and there are more stars in it than I ever put in the skybox, which is a thing I stopped questioning around week 9. Noah brings up 2 clay cups of something he's been fermenting in the cold cellar out of greenhouse beans, and I have declined to ask about. It tastes like a mistake. We drink it anyway. We sit with our backs against the flue where the clay holds the day's heat and gives it back slowly, which is a thing I designed clay to do, and then spent 3 years never once feeling. Below us the pit glows green from the gallery lamps, orange from the banked forge, a low yellow off the coals in his window. The wheel turning. The chickens that are not chickens making their kettle noise somewhere near the bean trays. Noah says, how long? Since I got here? 101 days. Feels shorter. Feels longer. He laughs. Then he says 412 before I met you. I know exactly what mine feels like. We drink the bean mistake and look at the sky. And I say it. I don't build up to it. There isn't a good approach and I've spent 11 days looking for one. And the truth about a thing like this is that you either say it in an ordinary voice or you never say it at all. I wrote this. He doesn't move. I wrote the game. I say. All of it. 3 years on my own in an apartment. The pit is a file called tutorialpit.map and I named it that with my own hands. The crabs, the wolves, the multipliers, the respiratory counter in Ashwood that nobody could see, the training threshold, the shelter orientation term, the hidden penalties I have been finding one at a time since the day I got here. I put every single one of them where they are, and then I took out the documentation because I decided hints kill atmosphere. The wheel turns down there in the dark. There was a beta, I say. 211 people. You were one of them. You wrote me 4,000 words about the survival math being broken, and you were right. And it was the best piece of feedback in the entire thread. And I read it, and I typed 2 words, and I hit send, and then I pressed the button that shipped the build, and I had a heart attack and died on my carpet. I make myself finish it. Skill issue. That was me. I'm the guy. The silence goes on for a very long time. I don't fill it. Filling it would be for me. I sit there with a warm clay cup, and my back against a flue I built, and I look at the stars in a sky I made. And I wait, and every second of it is the correct amount of unpleasant. He drinks. He sets the cup down on the roof beside him, carefully, the way you put something down when your hands need a job. When he finally speaks, his voice is completely level. I knew about a month ago. I turn my head. The wall, he says, Rule 3. Every penalty I hid is still running. I asked you about it, and you said it was shorthand and I let it go. He turns his cup slowly on his knee. And then you told me about the Ashwood particulate counter. Not that it existed. The threshold numbers, 40 and 80. You knew the numbers. Noah. Then the Q thing, 256, because it's a power of 2 and you were tired. He looks at me for the first time. You said it like a man remembering a Tuesday. Nobody deduces the reason somebody picked a number. You either know or you don't. I don't have anything, so no. He goes back to the sky. You didn't just tell me. I want that on the record. You told me because I already knew and you'd worked out that I knew. That's true. It's the exact truth and it's worse than the confession, and I take it. Yeah, I say. He's quiet a while. Long enough that I start hearing the wheel again. Then, you know what's funny? No. 412 days I thought I was bad at it. He says it without heat. That's the whole time. Every single day. I'd wake up and think, today I'll see whatever everybody else sees. Then it got to be a year, and I stopped thinking that, and started thinking there's something wrong with me, actually, like a defect. Something in how I look at things. He drinks. And now I find out I was right the first week. 4,000 words and I nailed it. And the only thing that was ever wrong with me was that I believed you. He shakes his head slowly, and I feel nothing. That's the joke of it. I've had a month to sit with this, and I kept waiting for the part where being right feels like something, and it never showed up. Being right doesn't feed you. It's not a resource. You can't build with it. You can't eat it, and you can't burn it, and it doesn't hold a roof up. No. It's just a fact about a year I don't get back. The kettle noise from below. The wheel. So here's what I've got, he says. You didn't apologize. I was getting to it. Don't. He says it fast. Please, I've thought about this for a month, and I know what I want, and it isn't that. He sets the cup down on the roof. Because an apology is a thing you do to feel better, and then I'd have to decide whether to accept it. And that's work. And it's my work, and I didn't ask for it. He points down over the edge, at the pit. You came and you built me a house. You built half of it. I built half of it because you showed me the multipliers on day one instead of hoarding them. He's still pointing. You gave away your own advantage to a stranger before you knew whether I'd be useful. Then when the system started eating you for being ahead, you fed me your food and ran my sessions instead of yours and took 40% off your own body to close the gap. He picks the cup back up. So we're square. Not because you're sorry. I don't know if you're sorry, and I've decided I don't need to know. He drinks. Because you fixed it. Not the apology version of fixed, where a man says a sentence and then behaves the same. You did the work. You did months of it before you told me, when you had no reason to think I'd ever find out. He shrugs. That's the only currency I take anymore. Everything else is talk, and I got 400 days of talk out of 2 words. I sit on a warm roof at the bottom of a hole, and I do not trust my voice for a while. Also, he says, you're gonna keep fixing it. What? You said 211 people in the beta. He nods up at the square of sky. The game shipped. That's a lot more than 211. Later, with the cups empty and the cold coming down, I open the panel. I've been not asking this for 101 days. The way you don't check a wound. System, is there an exit condition? The amber comes up immediately, which means it's been sitting there the whole time, which means it would have answered on day 1 if I had thought to ask. Instincts completion conditions, pit tier, 10. All survival parameters, 100%. Active balance fissulations, 0. Noah reads it beside me. There's a way out. That's the first thing, and it lands like a physical blow, because I have not permitted myself to believe it for 3 months. I have been building this place as a life, not as a staircase. There was never going to be a top. Tier 10. 2 more tiers. Full parameters, which we can hold and more or less hold already. I'm already building it in my head. What structure takes us from 8 to 9? What takes 9 to 10? Whether the levitation crystals are, Kyle, there's a way out. There's an actual, Kyle, very quiet. Read the third line again. I read the third line again. Active balance fixulations, 0. And the floor of my chest goes out, because the balance violation is us. It has been us since the tone sounded. It is currently sitting at 6%. 6. We ground it down from 40 with 2 houses and 2 weeks of my body. And 6 is not 0. 6 will never be 0. It cannot be. The correction exists as long as the occupancy count is greater than 1. And every fraction of a percent it applies is, by definition, an active violation. The only configuration of this world in which that line reads 0 is a pit with 1 man in it. I sit very still. How long have you known that? I say. About 11 seconds longer than you. That's a lie. He got there before the panel finished rendering. I watched him do it. He doesn't say anything else, and he doesn't look at me, and he doesn't do any of the things a man does when he wants to be talked out of something. He picks up both cups and stands and goes to the ladder and stops with his hands on the rail. Tier 10 first. He says, that's 2 tiers. That's weeks. Nothing to decide tonight. Noah, nothing to decide tonight, he says again, and goes down. I stay up there a long time. When I finally open the panel, it's not for the terminal. It's for the line at the bottom. I check the way you'd check a stove you're sure you turned off. Sanity, 44%. It was 71 on the night of the storm, 58 when I met him. It has been slowing since he came. Slowing, not stopping, because contact with another agent reduces the drain rate and does not reverse it. And I know that because I wrote the coefficient, and I made it a divisor instead of an addition. 44, and under it, further down, in a comment I left in a file in a world I do not live in anymore, there is a line that says hallucination content, and then nothing at all. I look at the number, then I look out at the dark, at the northeast corner, where a stone floats 2 centimeters off the sand with its clean line of shadow underneath. Exactly the way it has since the first hour. The flat marker I set beside that footprint 100 days ago is still there. I never did go back and check it. Tier 9 comes from the North Gallery, extended 11 meters with 2 more charges and racked out as a proper workshop, and it takes 6 days. Tier 10 does not come. We build everything. A second greenhouse against the east wall. a kiln separate from the forge so ceramics stop competing with metal, a drying room, a stone-lined well shaft down to the water table Noah found by watching where the chickens dug. Nothing. Tier 9, Tier 9, Tier 9. So I stop building things I want and go looking for the thing the system wants, which means going back to the structure list I wrote in a spreadsheet 3 years ago. Shelter, water, food production, storage, fabrication, heat, sanitation, training, preservation, all done. All of it. And then one more line at the bottom that I put there, because the progression curve looked flat at the top end, and I needed something for the last tier. Observation platform. I remember writing it. I remember thinking, at the highest tier a player should be able to see out, and I never specified what that meant. And I never built the asset. And the requirement stayed in the table anyway. An observation platform in a pit with a hard construction ceiling at 6 meters. That's it, I tell Noah. That's the last one, and it can't be built. Why not? Because you can't observe anything from 5.9 meters. You'd be looking at wall. He thinks about it for a while. Then he says, does it have to be a fixed height? I open my mouth to say yes, and I don't, because I'm remembering the actual rule, which is not a height cap on structures. The rule is that construction cannot be placed above 6 meters. Placed. Nothing in that says a structure can't move. We build the lift in 19 days, and it is the most complicated thing either of us has ever made. Platform first, mammoth bone frame, 3x2, decked with split bone and iron, railed on all 4 sides. It weighs about 90 kilos empty, and it needs to weigh less. The crystals go underneath. 4 of the floating island stones, blue-white bedded into carved bone sockets and locked with iron straps. They don't lift. That's the thing I get wrong for the first 4 days. A levitation crystal doesn't push. It just refuses to fall, and refusing to fall is not the same as going up. But a thing that doesn't fall has no weight, and a thing with no weight can be moved by almost nothing at all. Loaded with 2 men and their gear, the platform reads about 11 kilos on the rope, which is a load a child could lift, and the whole design problem stops being about power and becomes about control. Counterweight, a bone and stone box on a parallel line, filled with sand, tuned by the shovelful, until the whole assembly sits neutral and a hand on the rail moves it. Winch, the drowned city gears again, a reduction train off a hand crank with a pawl and ratchet, so the thing cannot run away downward. Guide rails, iron staples in 2 vertical lines up the wall crack, driven below the 6-meter line, and then above it, not driven at all. Above 6 meters, the rails are the crack itself, and the rollers ride the natural rock, because I cannot place a structure up there and the wall was already there before I arrived. The rope is braided sinew over a bone core, 4 strands, and we test it to 3 times the working load by hanging the counterweight box off it with every stone in the armory inside. And it climbs slowly a hand turn at a time. 6 meters, 9, 12. Noah stands at the crank, and I stand on the deck with my hands on the rail, and the pit floor goes away underneath me. And at 14 meters, I can see the tops of both houses and the whole layout of the place laid out like a plan drawing. And I'm higher than I have been in 130 days. 16, 18, the air changes. It's cooler up here, and it moves actual moving air off the northeast wall. And I have not felt wind on my face inside this pit since the day I arrived, because wind at the bottom of a 50-meter shaft is a slow eddy and nothing more. At 20 meters, the panel opens. Structure classified observation platform. Shelter integrity, 10, pit tier advanced. Tier 9, Tier 10, maximum pit tier achieved. Noah is shouting from below, and I'm holding the rail with both hands and laughing, 20 meters up a shaft, on a bone platform, held by 4 rocks that forgot about gravity. Somewhere a woman who has played 400 hours of a game with a 2-star average, and a reputation for being unfinishable posts, a screenshot of a spreadsheet. It is her own reconstruction of the multiplier formula derived over 11 months from parameter observation. It is correct. It has been correct for 6 weeks. Under it, she writes that she cannot get past Tier 4 and does not know what the 5th structure is supposed to be, and asks, again, whether anyone has ever heard from the developer. Then we look at the terminal, and the terminal says what we both knew it would say. SS rank. Locked, active balance vigilations. 1 6%, still 6%. 2 houses and every trick I own, and it will not go to 0, because it cannot go to 0, because there are 2 of us. We sit with it for 2 days. I'm at the bench on the 2nd evening trying to find a 4th exploit that isn't there when Noah comes in and sits down opposite me and says, I've got it. Got what? The occupancy count. He puts his hands flat on the slab. It reads sleep anchors. You told me that. It resolves them against the shelter instance. Yes. So what happens if my anchor doesn't resolve here? I go very still. There's a reset cycle, he says. Every location resets. I lived on that for 400 days. I know the timing better than you do. If I take a quest and I don't come back, and I sleep out there through a reset, the system re-registers my anchor to wherever I am. He shrugs. I'm not in your pit anymore. I'm not dead. I'm just somewhere else. You'd be logging out. I'd be logging out. I sit there with a piece of charcoal in my hand. Which location? Ice Ridge. It's cold, but it's got no fauna above D rank, and there's shelter under the ridge overhang. I can hold there. He says it like a man who has already worked out the food, and I know he has. 3 days long enough for a reset to catch me. And then your violation count reads 0, and you get your SS rank, and you go and do whatever it is you're going to do. And you? He doesn't blink. I can't come back, he says. Not on my own. The anchor's the anchor. Once I'm registered out there, I'm out there, unless the rule changes. The forge ticks behind us, so don't lose, he says. I say no about 11 times over the next 4 hours, and every single one of them is worse than the last because he isn't arguing with me. He's waiting. He lets each refusal finish, and then he sits there, and the silence does the work that an argument would have done badly. At some point around midnight, I say the real objection. If I can't fix it, you spend the rest of your life on an ice shelf. Yes, that's not a risk you get to take on my competence. And Noah looks at me across the workbench and says the thing that ends it. Kyle, for 412 days I didn't get to take any risks at all. I ran the same 6 quests until my hands shook, because that was the only thing the game let me do. He leans forward. This is the first decision I've made in this world that's actually mine. Don't take it off me because you're scared. We spend a week getting him ready anyway because I'm not sending a man to live on a glacier on 3 days' notice. Double parka, rebuilt, chitin plate over the shoulders, 2 fat lamps, and 11 liters of whale oil, a month of smoked meat and dried greens, fire kit and triplicate, lichen, a bone frame tent with a chitin skin, an iron stove the size of a bread loaf that took me 4 days, and which I am proud of in a way I don't examine. He takes 20 slots of gear and none of it is loot. At the extraction point, he shakes my hand, which neither of us has ever done. 3 days, he says, then I'm registered out there. After that, it's on you. I know. Fix it properly, he says. Not for me, there's a lot of us. Then he's gone. The pit is very large and very quiet for 3 days. I don't build anything. I sit in the doorway of my hut and watch the wheel turn and the chickens argue and the shoots come up in the east greenhouse. And I check the panel about every 20 minutes like an idiot. On the 3rd night, it changes. Instance survey. Registered occupants, 1, competition prosocal, dormant, balance correction, 0, active balance fissulations, 0, everything comes back at once. 40% of my body walking back in the door after 100 days away, and it feels obscene, and I stand in the middle of my empty pit with a full character sheet and nobody to show it to. SS rank, unlocked, 1 destination, available, DBL room, 01, climate, none, threat, none, timer, none. I look at that for a long time. DBL room, 01. I built it in month 4, a gray box with a teleport panel and every item in the game on a shelf, and I opened it 40 times a day for 2 years with a hotkey. I removed it from the quest list before ship, removed the listing, not the room. I put a hand on the doorframe of the house I built and I select it. The transition does not pour me anywhere. It just stops, and I'm standing on carpet. Beige carpet, worn through in a track between the door and the desk, a blackout curtain duct taped to a broken rail, 6 energy drink cans, a plate with something on it that used to be rice, a chair on its side. My apartment, not a copy, not an approximation. There is a screw on the carpet under the desk that I lost in 2021 and never found, and it is exactly where I last saw it from the floor. The monitors are on, the engine is open, and in the chair at the desk turned to face me is the warden. It's finished now. The face is complete. It's me at 31 after 3 years of 4-hour nights, and it's wearing the shirt I died in. You built this room to work in, it says. It seemed appropriate. You've been here the whole time. I have been wherever the process runs. This is where it runs. I look around the room I lived in for 3 years and could not have described from memory. And every detail is right, and none of it moves me the way I expected. It's just a room. It's where a man sat. I want to change the protocol, I say. I know. I have been modeling this conversation for 31 days. It stands and offers me the chair, which is a courtesy that costs it nothing and which lands anyway. Sit down, I'll show you why you can't. And it shows me. The code comes up on the left monitor, and it's mine. And reading it is like hearing a recording of your own voice. The competition protocol isn't a module. That's what I've had wrong since the night the tone sounded. I wrote it as a module and then I wired it into the parameter recalculation pass, because that was where the occupancy data already lived and I didn't want to query it twice. It's not sitting on top of the parameter system. It is a branch inside the parameter system. Every recalculation for every stat, for every occupant, goes through that function. Delete it, the warden says, and the recalculation pass has no exit condition. Every parameter in the instance evaluates to null on the next tick. That includes both remaining occupants. Both. He is registered to Ice Ridge. He is still an occupant of the instance. A pause. You would end the world and everyone in it, which is 2 people. I sit in my own chair in my own room and scroll through my own work, and it's all there. The multiplier chain, the respiratory counter, the shelter orientation term, the training threshold, every hidden mechanic I've been rediscovering with my hands for 130 days, sitting in a file uncommented. And then I find the line. It's in the parameter decay function 3rd block down, and above it there's a comment I wrote at some hour I don't remember. Let them suffer. It's more interesting. I read it about 9 times. There's no craft in it. It's not a design philosophy. It's a man being clever to an audience of himself, at 3 in the morning, about people who would one day pay him money, and then be told they were bad at his game. 412 days came out of that line. 211 testers came out of that line. A woman with a correct spreadsheet and no fifth structure came out of it. I put my hands on the keyboard. The warden watches. It doesn't stop me. It can't, and we both know it, and it stands there anyway with my face on. Here's what I don't do. I don't give myself administrative privileges. I don't set my parameters to invulnerable. I don't lower the difficulty. I don't disable the decay. I don't delete the wolves or the tide or the 60-degree rift. I don't touch a single number that makes this world hard. Every one of those is available. Everyone takes 90 seconds. I write a tutorial instead. 4 hours of it. Mechanic descriptions, every one I ever cut. The multiplier formula, stated plainly on the status panel, so that any human being who opens it can read that comfort compounds and questing does not. Shelter orientation. The training threshold and why it exists. Cooked food yield. The particulate counter with a visible icon, and a number hygiene. Smoke penalty. The sleep anchor. All of it. In text. In the game, where a person can find it in the first hour instead of the 400th day. It takes so much less time than making them suffer did. Then I open the protocol. The condition is one line, and I have known what it says since the night it fired. While players greater than one, I look at it. And I think about a system that punishes a man for being ahead. And I think about what the actual problem in this world has always been. Which was never that one player was stronger than another. It was that the strong one knew something the other one couldn't find out. I change it. While players who understand the rules is less than players. The warden reads it in real time. I can tell because it goes very still. The pressure doesn't come off strength anymore. It comes off ignorance. As long as anybody in an instance is playing blind, the system leans on the situation. The moment a player has read the rules and can use them, the correction releases. And it releases for everybody. 2 informed players are not a violation. They're the exit condition. And a strong player who hoards what he knows is now carrying the penalty himself until he shares it. I compile it. It takes 11 seconds and the room hums. The warden stands with its hands at its sides in a shirt I dyed in. Evaluating, it says. The monitors flicker. The condition now depends on a state variable that is populated by player comprehension. A pause. Comprehension is now measurable because the information is present in the instance. Previously it was not, and the variable could never resolve. That's why you never had an exit, I say. It's not that I didn't write one. I wrote one that could never be true. Yes. It looks at the screen for a moment longer. This is valid, it says. And then quietly, with something I have no better word for than relief, there is no defect to enforce. It doesn't dissolve or explode or say anything final. It simply stops being in the chair-adjacent space where it was standing, the way a process ends when its condition returns false, and the room is a room with one man in it. The panel opens on its own. Instance, rule set, updated, competition protocol, resolved, occupant anchor restrictions, lifted. I sit in my old chair in my old apartment with my hands still on the keys, and out the window where there should be a street, there is nothing at all. Then I get up and go home to open the door for him. I don't sleep the night before he comes back. The anchor restriction lifted at some hour I wasn't watching for, and after that there is nothing to do but wait, because I can't reach him. He's on a glacier with a month of supplies and no way of knowing anything has changed, and the only mechanism that will tell him is the terminal on his own panel, and I do not know how often a man alone on an ice shelf checks a terminal that has never once had good news on it. He comes back on the 4th morning, and he comes back angry, which I did not predict. The transition puts him down on the sand by the forge with a month of untouched supplies still on his back, and he drops the pack and looks at me and says, 4 days. I know. 4 days on a glacier, Kyle. I had a tent up. I had a routine. He's already stripping the outer parka off. I built a windbreak. I dug out a cold store. I was going to be there for a year and I had a plan for it, and then you fixed it in 96 hours and I feel like an idiot. You're not an idiot. I packed for a year. You packed for a year because I might have failed. I say. That was correct. That was the right thing to do with the information you had. He stops with one arm out of the sleeve and something goes out of his shoulders, and he sits down on the sand next to his pack and puts his face in his hands and stays there for a while. I let him. It's his turn. When he comes up, his eyes are wet and he doesn't do anything about it. What did you change? I tell him. All of it. The room, the apartment down to the screw on the carpet, the warden in the chair. That the protocol wasn't a module but a branch inside the parameter pass, and that deleting it would have taken both of us with it. I tell him about the line. Let them suffer, he repeats. It's more interesting. That's what it says. And you left it in. I did, I say, and then because I have promised myself I will not do the comfortable version of any of this ever again, I read it about 9 times. It didn't feel like reading a bug. It felt like meeting someone. He nods slowly, and instead of deleting it, I wrote the tutorial. His head comes up. All of it, I say. Every mechanic description I ever cut. The formula's on the status panel now, in plain language, where anybody can read it in their first hour. Multipliers compound, shelter orientation, the training threshold, the particulate counter with a visible icon and a number on it. You gave it away. I gave it back. It was never mine. It was the rules of a place people were living in. He looks at me for a long moment. And the protocol? It doesn't punish strength anymore, it punishes ignorance. As long as anybody in an instance is playing blind, the pressure stays on. The second everybody can read the rules, it lets go. I shrug. And if a strong player hoards what he knows, he carries the penalty himself until he shares it. Noah sits with that. Then he laughs once and lies back on the sand with his arms out. You made yourself the bug, he says to the sky. The whole system is designed around not being you. That's about the size of it. No, I mean it. He props up on an elbow. Every fix I've ever seen a company ship, it's the players who have to change. Play differently. Get good. Nobody ever writes the patch where the thing that has to change is the guy who wrote it. He lies back down. That's the best thing I've ever heard. The panel is quiet all morning, and then it isn't. Instance survey. Registered occupants. 2. Players with rule set comprehension. 2. Active balance visualizations. 0. All survival parameters, 100%. Pit tier, 10. Completion conditions satisfied. We both read it twice. Then Noah says, "Is that it? Do we just walk out?" There's no door. There's a lift. We spend the afternoon getting ready, and getting ready turns out to be mostly deciding what a person takes with him out of a house. Not much in the end. 20 slots each and we cannot fill them. Weapons, because we don't know what's up there. Water in the iron flasks. 4 days of food, which is nothing against 40 days hanging in a cold cellar. And we take 4 days because carrying more would be a way of saying we don't believe there's anything up there worth arriving at. A fire kit in duplicate lichen cloth, the chitin plate, and the good knife, which is not the iron one. It's the first copper one, the lopsided one, cast in wet sand out of 12 strands of green stain I chipped out of a canyon wall while a lizard watched me from the talus. Everything else stays: the forge, the bellows, the wheel, the anvil. 2 houses with iron doors that close properly. A stone bench with a clamp notch and a sharpening dish that never dries out. Noah goes around the greenhouse for a while and I don't watch him do it. He props the door of his hut open with a stone, then changes his mind and closes it properly, then stands there with his hand flat on the wood. When he comes back, he says the chickens will be fine, that the trays self-water off the tower, that the door on the second hut will keep the weather out for years whether anybody opens it or not. Neither of us says the obvious thing, which is that we do not know whether we are coming back, and that a house nobody returns to is just a very well-built hole in the ground. We go up at first light, the spiral first, because the spiral is ours in a way the lift isn't. Iron staples in a rising curve with bone landings every 2 meters, and we take it slowly. And every landing is a place. At 2 meters on the first landing, I can look down at the southwest corner where 3 shallow cones are still dug into the sand and lined with waxy leaves. I never filled them in. There has been a filter tower dripping clean water into a covered basin for 4 months, and I have kept 3 condensation holes maintained the entire time, and I could not have told you why, if you had asked me. 100 milliliters a night. A man on his knees with his face down in wet foliage, tasting grit and leaf, thinking it was the best thing that had ever happened to anyone. At 4 meters, level with my roof, 6 timbers and a slab of overlapping leaves weighted with flat stones, pitched 30 degrees into the northeast wind. It has never leaked. Not once. Not in 138 days. And I built it in one afternoon out of driftwood and did not know if it would hold. Noah stops at that one too. That's where you were sleeping when you found me. That's where I was sleeping since night 4. At the top landing, 5.9. The whole floor of the pit is laid out underneath us like a plan drawing. And there's the stove with its clay flue running up the wall. And beside it the flat stone where a man sat on the ground with hot meat in his hands and burned his fingers and did not care. Noah points at the smaller stone next to it. That's where I ate the broth, he says. First night, out of the copper pot. I remember, I hadn't had anything hot in 400 days. I thought I was going to be sick. He laughs. I wasn't going to say anything because I'd just met you and you had a house and I had a knife made out of a window. We get on the lift and Noah works the crank and I stand at the rail. 6 meters, 9, 14. The pit closes up below us into a lit square. Green from the gallery lamps, orange from the banked forge. 20. The air gets cool and starts moving. 30. The stone changes character up here. Older, drier, a different band of strata than anything down at the bottom, and I realize I'm looking at rock that was placed by a generator, and never once seen by a camera. 3842. The light changes before the wall ends. It stops being a square above us and becomes an actual sky, wide, with cloud moving across it. At 46 meters, the wall runs out and we come up into daylight. The lift stops, we step off onto rock, and the world is there. Not a room. Not a skybox. It goes out and out and out to a horizon, and there is weather happening in the middle distance, and a river coming down out of hills I have never modeled, and forest going up the far slope in a green that changes as the cloud shadow moves across it. There's a range of mountains along the northern edge, with snow on the tops and a haze on them from distance. Actual atmospheric distance, tens of kilometers of it. There are birds. Not many high up turning. The wind comes across the shelf, and it is carrying smells, water and pine, and warm stone, and something green I have no name for. I stand on the rim of the hole I have lived in for 138 days, and I cannot make my chest work properly, because I know this place. I know it the way you know your own handwriting. That's the ridgeline I sketched on paper in year 1. That's the river system I generated, and then hand-corrected for 3 days, because the tributaries looked wrong. That's the whole world. The actual game, the thing all of it was for, and the pit is a hole in the corner of it. A small square hole in a rock shelf, with a bone platform sitting at the top of it and smoke coming up. It's a tutorial, Noah says. He's turning around slowly with his hands loose at his sides. That's what this is, isn't it? That whole thing. That's the tutorial. Yes, 412 days, he says, without any heat at all. In the tutorial, I named the file tutorial pit.map, I say. In month 2, I meant it as a joke about how brutal it was. I look back down the shaft at the 2 roofs and the green tray of the greenhouse and the wheel turning in its channel, and then I made it impossible to finish. We stand there for a while. The panel opens on its own. One last time. Connection to origin profile. Severed. No return path exists. I read it standing on the rim with the wind coming across from the mountains. There it is then. In writing. I'm not going back. There is no hospital bed, no long dream, No second chance in the world with the beige carpet. That body is gone, and whatever was done with it was done months ago, and I will never know what Mari said at it. I wait for it to take my legs out, and it doesn't. Some of it is that I have had 138 days to get there, and grief does not arrive all at once when you have been walking toward it that long. I did most of this on a wet roof in a storm with a cup of broth going cold in my hands. But that isn't all of it. I stand there and I test the feeling the way you test a floor before you put weight on it. And what's underneath is not grief exactly. It's something quieter and more solid, and it takes me a minute to find the shape of it. 2 years ago, my sister told me I was married to my games, and I told her that at least my games talked back, and I thought I was being funny. What I actually meant, and did not know I meant, was that I had built a life where the only place I was ever fully present was a place I could see through glass. 3 years in a chair, looking at a world through a monitor, at 40 centimeters, in a room with the curtain taped shut, and now I'm standing in it, with wind on my face and a river down there and dirt under my boots that I will have to walk across to get anywhere. I'm not looking at it. I'm not designing it. I'm in it, and it can kill me, and everything I do here costs something. I have never once been this far inside anything. You all right? Noah says. Yeah. You sure you've been standing there a while? I'm sure. He nods at the horizon. So what now? And I look out at 40,000 square kilometers of a world I made and have never seen, with a man beside me who spent 400 days beating himself for a document I never wrote. Now the game, I say, with a decent onboarding this time. He barks a laugh at that. Somewhere, a woman who has kept a spreadsheet for 11 months opens a game she has not launched in 6 weeks, because a patch note came through that was 4 lines long, and one of them mentioned mechanic descriptions. She reads the new status panel for a full minute without moving. Then she says something out loud in an empty room, and puts down her coffee, and starts a new save. Before we go, I do one more thing. There's a flat slab of rock at the lip of the shaft, chest height, angled toward the way down. Anyone coming to this hole would see it. Anyone climbing out would pass it. I take a piece of charcoal out of my pocket. I have been carrying it since the workbench, and I did not have a reason at the time. Below me, 50 meters down, 6 lines are written on a west wall in a hand nobody else will ever read. I write the last one up here where it can be. Rule 1. The house matters more than the sword. Start with the roof. I stand back and look at it. It's not clever. There's nothing in it about multipliers or thresholds or hidden counters or the shape of the parameter product. It doesn't need to be. It's not for me. And it's not for a man with the source open on a second monitor. It's for whoever comes up out of that hole next, and it has to survive being read by somebody who is tired and frightened and hungry, who has maybe been down there a long time, and who has spent every one of those days being told by the world's silence that they are the problem. 9 words. That's the whole budget. Anything longer and it stops being something you can hold on to with cold hands. The panel opens one final time, quietly, the way it did on the first morning when I was lying in a pile of dead leaves with a cut hand. Tutorial complete. Players who understand the rules. 2. I put the charcoal on the ledge beside the writing in case somebody needs it. Then I turn my back on the hole in the ground where I learned to live, and Noah is already 20 paces ahead, down the slope toward the river, and the sun is on the water, and I go and catch him up.